Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Place and Environment Scrutiny Committee. We'll start with apologies for absence. I have Councillor Shacklock. Any others that anybody knows? No? Next item would be election of a vice chair. Do we have any nominations, please? Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm happy to propose Councillor Irwin, wealth of experience, so it'd be nice to bring that to the committee.
Thank you. A seconder for that, please. Councillor Coleman was first.
I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay, thank you. We'd all like to agree that then, please, just for the formality. Thank you. Okay. So Councillor Irwin is Vice Chairman. So next we have the minutes of the meeting on the 5th of February, which are in your pack. Any matters of correction or people not happy with? No. Can we agree them, please, then? All happy with that? I shall sign them. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest not on the website already from anybody? Councillor Irwin.
Yes, Chair. I'm not sure whether this counts or not, but as a member of the, as others are here, in fact, member of the Town Council of Wellingborough, we're in discussions at the moment regarding asset transfers, and that would have potentially a conflict with item 8. Yeah. I don't know whether that counts or not.
Well, it's worthwhile noting it for openness, and I have the same interest that I'm also part of Wellingborough Town Council. That is not and Councillor Anslow, that's not a pecuniary, just a personal interest. Councillor Pengelly.
Whatsoever, but if we are, then I've got an interest, but I don't know if we are or aren't. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But we may do in the future.
Obviously, if anything crops up later on, please shout straight away. Next, we have notification of request to attend the meeting. I have 6, and this is the order I'll take them in. Mr. Jones, I don't know. No. And I had Councillor Mitchell from Kettering, and Councillor Hakewill, Councillor Lee, Councillor Watts, and Councillor Pandy. The last two being the ward councillors. Okay. So first item for discussion is the future of Kettering Leisure Village. Do we have Mr. Jones, or is he not? No, I can't see. Yeah. Perhaps we'll ring down, see if he's got caught out with the lifts problem. Yeah. In case, move on. Councillor Mitchell. No. Check them both, please, Emma.
Can I ask a point of clarification before the meeting starts, please?
We'd have started, but go on.
Yeah. Well, before people start talking, we've got a report in front of us tonight, and it's about the future of Kettering Leisure Village. We have a very detailed report from a company called Max Associates. Is anybody from Max Associates here this evening to go through the report? Is there somebody here?
There's shaking of the head to the right, so probably not.
From Max Associates, not an officer. Is there anybody from Max Associates?
I'm saying they're shaking their head, so...
There isn't.
No.
Can I ask why nobody from Max Associates is here tonight to give us a detailed report? We've got the report in front of us. It's not, we've got a big building here, a building that is important for the people of Kettering, and we have a situation where we've had a report commissioned that this council have paid for, and we want to ask this company questions. If this is scrutiny done in the proper way, we want to ask some questions about this report. That's what scrutiny is about. It's not about speaking to officers for their interpretation of the report. It's about speaking to people that we've paid to do the report. Simple as that. So why are they not here, please?
So perhaps Mrs. Pennell can...
They're not here because it was just felt that everything that we need to know is in the report, and officers have been to the report and spoke to them with a fine-tooth comb, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions that you have.
Obviously, if we have questions that need to go back to them, the officers can relay them. So we'll make the point. Okay. So, Councillor Hakewill, you're next on the list as the first two aren't present. If I could remind speakers they have 3 minutes and to keep it succinct and not to repeat, it obviously won't apply to Councillor Akewell, not to repeat what's been said before. Happy for you to endorse things, but not just, we have a heavy agenda. Right.
Thank you for the ground rules, but I will repeat what Councillor Pengelly said. And you'll know as a Scrutiny Vice Chair from the county, Councillor Lorman, that if we had a report like this, we would invite those who wrote it to come and talk to us. So thank you. I'm delighted that I put this issue on the agenda within days of the announcement of the closure of Kettering Conference Centre on July the 3rd last year. I'm very pleased to attend the public meeting, which was organised by Councillor Kelly Watts, and even more pleased to get a full council debate on the future of Kettering Conference Centre, from which today's meeting has come forward. This is what I call being a good councillor and recognising when an issue looked like it was going to sink behind the radar. I'm not sure if anyone on the committee, as I look around the room, has actually given any evidence to this company called Max Associates. And it might be nice to know that if any councillors have been approached by them, to actually give evidence as local councillors, not on the executive, but local backbench councillors. Perhaps members might mention that, because if, as I sense, no one has, we are once again doing a scrutiny bypass of the very 78 people who are the backbench councillors. I sat on the planning committee when the Kettering Leisure Village, as it was then, and I think I should make the point, Leisure Village. It became Kettering Conference Centre to do commercialisation that is much talked about at Chester Farm, to be able to help subsidise the theatre and the dry sports. My concern is that the KCC, Kettering Conference Centre, is the home of the town's dry sports. It's also the home of Kettering Town's Theatre. And as precious to Kettering as the cube here we're sitting in tonight is, or the Castle Theatre in Wellingborough, or other facilities. And there was a real risk back then that it was just going to be a conference centre closing down. So I'm glad to hear that we're doing that. The conference centre is one of the best in the area, in the region. It brought big conferences into Kettering, and it is absolutely crucial to the economic viability. It's an economic engine for Kettering. When a full conference comes, 600 rooms are occupied locally, and I can't reinforce that enough. I hope that members of this committee will send a very clear message to the executive that the Kettering Conference Centre and the facilities within it are critical to the life and times of North Northamptonshire. My last point is, for 3 years I've been trying to get some profit and loss or surplus and deficit figures for places like Chester Farm, Discovery, all the other places. It has been impossible to get a clear set of financial figures upon which a decision could be made. Chester Farm's okay, Corby Pool's okay, the castle is okay. We have no accurate financial statistics to help us make those decisions. And I hope this committee will pass that on to the executive so that we actually make decisions based on financial data, not on hearsay or preference as to where you happen to live.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you, Councillor Akewell. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. It's been said tonight that everything we need to know is in the report. I dispute that. One of the many things missing is what contract management is the authority putting in place to ensure that PLMD is using its reasonable endeavours. How closely will we monitor whether those objectives are being fulfilled? Will we be vigilant, observant, attentive, proactive, responsive? It is outlined in this report that it's not in NNC's interest, which I dispute, to take on the leisure village. So in that case, it could be argued that maybe NNC won't be making every effort to try and monitor that the conditions are being adhered to. The proposed agreement would apply for a 3-year period. What happens after that? The report states that if KLV were to come back into the Council's full control prior to this date, it would need to be considered alongside the other contracts. So, are there no economies of scale that would apply then? The Council's vision of active, fulfilled lives is extremely important. In fact, the Health and Wellbeing Board will dedicate its June meeting to keeping people active. So I hope that no stone is left unturned to keep KLV functioning at the highest possible level. And I don't understand why the option of a community interest group has not been put forward as an option, a CIC, I mean. The footfall for the sports arena was very high. It is a well-used arena. The next 3 years will give some breathing space for NNC to develop more ideas, so I hope that we will carefully monitor the situation and reconsider the options for all the residents using the KLV facilities and future generations as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. The recommendation for this report is simply that the contents are noted, but as the ward councillor, I wanted to take the opportunity to come along and make some comments and ask a few questions. Like Councillor Hakewell, I would have made possibly different comments if there had been figures included in the report. The people who are interested in KLV and the people who rely on it for their mental health join me in keeping an eagle eye on this situation. I've been a member of the gym for 23 years, and over the past 14 months or so, practically every time I go, including this very morning, people ask me, is everything going to be okay with KLV? After reading this report, I'm not that confident. Councillor Lee has just spoken about measuring the best efforts and endeavours. That's something I was going to speak about, so I shall not do that. When the news of KLV closing surfaced, a formidable group of enthusiastic, smart, and capable people from all sectors of the community came together to campaign to save the site. These people offered their skills and their time to anyone who would listen. And there were some great ideas, really innovative ones, and really well thought out, offered up genuinely to any partners that would care to listen, especially Phoenix. I checked with the campaigners over this weekend, and exactly as I thought, apart from a meeting with Max Associates last year, Phoenix hasn't tried to engage with this group. The campaigners and the users would love to meet face-to-face with Phoenix to hear firsthand about their plans and see how the group could help. Yes, there have been some investment. There are a few new pieces of gym equipment. But is that really what the users want? Because arguably there are more pressing issues to do with user safety, hygiene, and security that remain a problem. Could the council broker a meeting with Phoenix on behalf of the campaigners and other interested parties, or at least pass the message on? One of the first questions would be to them, what can be done to bring the other parts of the facility back into service, like the conference area and the much-needed kids' play area too? And lastly, I just wanted to express concern about the formulation of the new leisure strategy, now due out in early 2025. Why is this taking so long? And how can we possibly think about the future of KLV, arena sports, the tracks and pitches in the area? And that goes for the whole county. This needs to be taken into account when speaking about any of these facilities. We can't even get a simple question answered about what the fate of the Northampton Pavilion is off Lakes Lane. At the last full council meeting, we were told that the Harriers use it, but of course that's not right. They use the building next to the tracks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watts and Councillor Pandy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I would like to thank officers and the team for preparing such a great and in-depth report. I remember the time when we were talking that KLV is going to close, and I thanked all the leadership team and the officer for saving it, and now it is still open. Since we discussed the motion, I've noticed that the Phoenix has invested a lot of capital in gym. They have revised their membership fee, and it's looking much better now. I've gone through this report, and I understand that running this center is not financially viable option. But there is no clarity what will happen to this. It would have been good to have some clarity or what will happen if they don't want to run this center. So I know it's not financially viable. So my request to the leadership team and the council would be to keep a close watch on this and ensure that it's open and is still serving the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if Ms. Pinnell would like to present the report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll endeavour first just to answer some of the questions. Some of them will be covered in my summary and or in the report. I think most speakers referred to the centre as Kettering Leisure Village. It is Kettering Leisure Village. The conference element is just one small part of Kettering Leisure Village. There has been financial data used by Max Associates, albeit it's financial data that relates to the previous operator, because that's the full P&L information that we have. When this report was pulled together by Max Associates in the last stages of 2023, Phoenix had only been operating the centre since the 1st of September, which is why it wasn't either reasonable or we were able to use up-to-date data from them. But there is absolutely financial data that this report is based upon. In terms of the various comments about needing to work closely with Phoenix and monitor the grant agreement closely, we do that. So just as a reminder, and I'll cover it, it's covered in the report, that the grant agreement only relates to the arena sports part of the sports facility, so it doesn't include the balanced gym. But it also we also have a grant agreement in relation to the theatre, and like all grant agreements, those are monitored robustly. We have monthly meetings with Phoenix, both in relation, separate meetings, one in relation to arena sports and one in relation to the theatre, and there are various obligations under that grant agreement, particularly in relation to compliance and health and safety, promotion, footfall, income and profit and loss information that we monitor closely. In terms of it being part of the strategic picture, absolutely. We are undertaking the overall active communities framework, as was alluded to. That does have quite a lengthy timeline to produce, and that is because things like our leisure facility strategy and in particular the playing pitch strategy have to be done across the seasons in order to get a full evidence data for those planning documents, and that is why it's taking some time. But we need to make sure that Kettering Leisure Village is considered, and I can reassure the committee that it's certainly in terms of dry side facilities, Kettering Leisure Village does have a strategic part to play in our overall leisure estate, and therefore, it is in all our interests to work with Phoenix in order to see it remain open and fully operational. And in terms of it was alluded to, I think, by Councillor Lee, that if we were in a position, and we'll come on to it when I introduce the report, if the council had to take a decision about what it was going to do because Phoenix completely walks away, and that's the only option, the time that we would consider that, then in the short term, the most, or the recommended option is that we would bring in another operator. And that's only because all the other leisure contracts will come to an end during 27 to 28. And so you're absolutely right about saying then strategically, what does it all look like? And is there economies of scale from 2027, 28 onwards? And the answer to that is most probably, but we need to look at that in line with the contract timelines. So Kettering Leisure Village Support Group were spoken to by Max Associates in terms of understanding the importance of the site to the community. We, at the time, as officers, provided a lot of information to Phoenix about lots of different individuals who had stepped forward or groups who had stepped forward. Phoenix are the owners of the site. They operate the site. They're a commercial company. You know, we can't dictate to them who they do or don't speak to, but I am more than happy to pass on the message again about them engaging themselves with a support group, particularly around bringing some of the current elements of the site that aren't in use. The question about viability, Councillor Pandy, so I will come on to it. So what the report is saying is that it's not viable for the council to operate the site. It is not saying that it's not viable for Phoenix to operate the site. I just want to make that point, because I think it's a really important distinction. Phoenix are a commercial company. So, Chair, if I may, I will introduce the report. So this report confirms and clarifies the legal ownership of the Kettering Leisure Village site and confirms that the Council's options are limited in terms of exercising control over it. Following threat of closure in May 2023, when Compass, who were the previous operators, decided to serve notice on their landlords, Phoenix Leisure, in June 2023, the Council passed a motion asking for a business plan to be prepared to address the feasibility of the Council stepping in to run Kettering Leisure Village. This report is presented in direct response to that motion. A report went to the Council's executive in August 2023, setting out plans to develop an options review for the future management of Kettering Leisure Village. Subsequently, Max Associates, who are the same consultants undertaking the wider work to provide an overarching active communities framework, including an active community strategy, a playing pitch strategy, and a sports facility strategy, and a future management options for the whole of the North Northampton Leisure Estate. Those consultants were appointed to produce the options review for KLV. The report presented today also sets out the work that was undertaken by the Council's executive and officers to broker a deal between Compass and Phoenix to keep Kettering Leisure Village open during the summer of 2023. That solution saw Compass surrender their sub-underlease to Phoenix at the end of August 2023 after a 2-month handover period. So since September the 1st, 2023, Phoenix Leisure have set up a trading arm and tupied the staff across from Compass and have been running Kettering Leisure Village under a concession to the existing lease, and that relates to the sports arena facilities and the theatre. To support Phoenix stepping in to operate Kettering Leisure Village and reduce the likelihood of its closure, the Council agreed to a 2-year temporary amendment of the obligation on Phoenix to use best endeavours to stay open, requiring Phoenix to use reasonable endeavours to keep the sporting facilities open. In practice, this change means Phoenix needs to take all reasonable steps available to it to keep the sporting facilities open, but would not be expected to sacrifice its commercial interests in doing so. This is a standard that is agreed in most commercial leases in respect of the obligations on the tenant and is a typical expectation of a court. Phoenix Leisure have been working extremely hard to rebuild the business from a low base last year, and whilst the conference and soft play facilities remain closed at this time, they are looking at what opportunities there are to them to open them. The theatre is still rebuilding, but indications from Phoenix Leisure are that they are committed to the site and to growing the business to make it sustainable for the future. From Phoenix's perspective, the site is absolutely viable. They are investing into it and want to take every opportunity to grow the business and to sustain and increase public confidence in it. The ownership of the site is clarified in the report in paragraphs 4.2 to 4.6. The freehold ownership sits with BQ Farms, that they have passported all responsibilities to the council, or they passported all responsibilities to the council in 1991 via a 116-year lease, which currently has 93 years left to run on it. The council, which was obviously Kettering Borough Council at the time, further passported responsibilities to the leaseholder Phoenix Leisure in the year 2000 by way of a coterminous lease, which therefore also expires in 2116 at a peppercorn rent. Whilst the cascading of responsibilities to Phoenix mitigate the council from direct repair obligations, it does not reduce the council's overall liability for repair obligations. The law surrounding dilapidations is complex, and so it is vital that the council continues to proactively engage with Phoenix on its obligations. The lease to Phoenix also provides positive obligations on the tenant to operate and manage the sports facilities and the theatre, including the provision to keep these facilities open to the public. These obligations do not include the other elements of the building, such as the gym and the conferencing facilities. So just to be absolutely clear, and officers have worked really hard to try and make sure this is clear in the report, ownership of the whole site and the buildings, therefore, by way of the year 2000 lease to Phoenix, currently sit with Phoenix until 2116, at which point the responsibility reverts to the council as the leaseholder, but immediately reverts to the freeholder BQ Farms, as the council's lease also runs out in 2116. The council does not therefore have control of the site as a result of the year 2000 lease, but given the obligations placed on the council by the covenants, which are within the original 1991 lease, the council must work proactively with Phoenix to mitigate any repair obligations and other lease covenants so that we can avoid breaching any covenants on our part. But just to be clear, the ownership and the full operation sits with Phoenix Leisure. Due to the requirement in the lease to keep the sports facilities open, the council provides an annual grant to support the sports facilities and a smaller grant for the theatre. And in 23-24 financial year, this grant totals £357,000. The grant increases annually in accordance with the retail price index. Legally, the council has limited step-in rights to the sports arena, and these only arise if the venue closes for a minimum of 2 days and does not give the council control of the premises. If the council were to enforce the step-in rights, should the leaseholder, i.e. Phoenix, then decide to step back in and manage the site again, the council, even if it had stepped in, would now have no option but to remove itself from the centre. Courts do not support keep open clauses, and the only recourse they would consider if a breach occurred is compensation to the landlord of any loss of income. This would not resolve the issue, and it's not likely that any compensation awarded would fully compensate any loss, and it doesn't guarantee that those costs would be paid to the council in any event. But as has already said, Phoenix has confirmed its commitment to the site and has made recent capital investment into it. Therefore, in direct answer to the motion, the council stepping in is not an option. Other options open to the council in the here and now are also set out in the report. The council could approach Phoenix and ask that they voluntarily relinquish their lease and all rights to the site at no cost to the council. Phoenix have not shown any indication that they would wish to relinquish the lease without payment. They have made a commercial investment to take on the lease and have invested in the site. It is highly unlikely they would wish to walk away without any financial compensation. The council could open negotiations with Phoenix to surrender their lease at a premium to the council. The cost of a negotiated surrender is currently unknown, as it would be dependent on Phoenix bringing this option forward and on a condition survey of the building and on business growth and profitability at the point of sale. Market value does not reflect worth to the council, nor necessarily does the price Phoenix would accept to surrender the lease. The option to negotiate a surrender of the lease is a matter for Phoenix to bring forward, but to do so at any cost to the council is not recommended at this stage. Dialogue will continue to be held with Phoenix on their future plans for the site, in particular how the tenant will ensure investment in the asset is secured to safeguard any financial risk to the council of dilapidations and to ensure preservation of the asset. As said earlier, council officers meet with Phoenix on a monthly basis regarding operation of both the sports arena and promotion of the offer across the site, and also in relation to the theatre. And council officers are working with Phoenix, particularly at the moment, regarding the development of a sustainable business plan for the theatre. The facts are that the council is not currently in a position of direct control such that it can take on the long-term management of Kettering Leisure Village, with the site being in control of Phoenix Leisure. The site is run independently as a commercial operation, and taking on responsibility for running such an enterprise would risk setting a precedent for the council, and as shown at the moment by the financial analysis undertaken by the consultants, would not be financially prudent. The report does go on to introduce the options review undertaken by Max Associates, but these options can only be considered if the site is in control of the council, which currently it is not. To produce their report, Max Associates engaged with Phoenix, with council officers, with members of Kettering's support group in terms of understanding the importance of the site to the local community. The options reviewed, as set out in the Max Associates report, are do nothing, in-house management of the service, procurement of an external contractor, and the establishment of a local authority controlled company to manage the site. All three options would result in additional projected operating costs of up to £484,000 to the council, over and above the current £357,000 grant provided. The option that would incur the least additional cost is the procurement of an external contractor, but this is still estimated at about £255,000. These costs, however, it should be noted, are projected costs at this time, and actual costs may differ at the time that the circumstance arises, should it do so. None of the additional costs that are set out in the report have been budgeted for in the 2024 budget, given that the council does not have control of the site. The council has a duty of best value, and therefore it must ensure that it receives this best value when considering the management options for Kettering Leisure Village, both in the short term and if it were to obtain control of the site in the longer term. The options review also details the solutions open to the council should Phoenix choose to surrender with a limited notice period, and therefore the council requires a quick management solution to avoid any site closure. The same options, if we should face that situation, are open to the council as set out in the report. Max Associates, assuming the council would not take a do-nothing option at that point, recommend the least costly option would be to make a direct award to an operator to manage the service for a short term, 2 to 3 years, to bring it in line with the other leisure contracts and to allow the council to assess and make a decision about its longer-term management solution for the whole of its leisure estate. But this would obviously need to be carefully reviewed at the time, and again, best value considerations have to be considered. So in conclusion, in direct response to the council motion following assessment of the options, it is not viable for the council to take on operational control of Kettering Leisure Village at this time due to the nature of legal ownership of the site. Furthermore, if that were to change and the council was in control of the site, the assessment of the options at this point in time also confirms that it would not be financially viable for the council to run the site, as there would be a significant cost detriment to the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that full explanation. I think we all appreciate the value and the importance of KLV. I think you covered all the questions from the speakers. I just want to make sure that we have picked them up. You talked about the Councillor Hatewill talked about the importance of the conference centre, and the future of that. But I think you covered that. You explained about what figures are available. One thing that I don't think you did cover, and it's probably not legally possible, but somebody mentioned a kick as an option, but I'm probably not allowed to do that. One thing that did occur, if somebody had to step in at short notice, there may be a gap. So how, and I don't think you can actually answer that now without somebody looking at it, but there may be a gap between appointing somebody, so that needs maybe considering. And you mentioned about meeting Phoenix and why the review is carrying on, so I think you've covered most of the points. Members of the committee, have you got any other questions for officers or points to make? Is that it? So I'm waiting for somebody to put their hand up. Councillor Pengelly.
I've got quite a few questions. So, first thing I'd like to say is I do recognise the amount of hard work that officers and councillors have put into this, and I also recognise the work that the Kettering Leisure Village supporters group have put into trying to keep that open. And I think we should commend everybody's involvement in it, because when we got that notice to say that it was closing down, I think we were all terrified of losing such a good facility, so I welcome that. I'm just wondering, a few questions. First one is, how did we procure Max Associates, and what have we as a council paid for them to carry out this work? And in the report it says they're carrying out this extra piece of work for us. What cost are they getting for that? So I think that's important, because we need to know how we got this company in whatever. And also, who have they spoken to? Because we know they've not spoken to any of the councillors from well, I know that the ones involved here have said they've not been spoken to. So who have they spoken to into this report? Because it's not a bad report, to tell you the truth, and I'm reading it differently to you on the findings of it. So they have put quite a bit of work into it. When you are a member of a scrutiny committee, officers have a duty to give us as much information as they can on the financial side of things. There's a lot of financial side of things that we don't know that are not in this report, because I know that you've said in the report that you've had sight of them, but we as committee members cannot get sight of that ourselves. So it's difficult for us to make a judgment, because what we need to know is what's making money, what's not making money, what's good and what's bad. I know this is short term, but longer term, that's important. You talk about further work going ahead on the full leisure provision for North Northamptonshire. From listening to what you said in that statement you read out, which is in the report, this will not be part of this, will it? Because this is standalone, running by a private company, and what you're saying is we can't get hold of it, so it'll have nothing to do with it, which I think people would be disappointed by. You've relied, and this is up and down the country, Conservative, Labour and the few Liberal Democrat councils are taking leisure facilities back in-house, and they're doing it in a big way, especially swimming pools. And they're doing it because it's more cost effective and it's easier to run. We've relied on some figures here to do with NNDR and VAT. A lot of these have been challenged in court by councils saying, look, you can't rely on that. And sometimes it's a one-year hit on things like an NDR and for the private companies, and then they have to pay it. So who's giving you the information? Who have we checked that information? Because that's really, really vital, important information, because if we're saying that we would make a loss on it, well, we'd lose more than the present operator, then that's not quite true. So how did you get them? How did you get that information? Have we challenged that? Because I know councils up and down the country have challenged it. And because the financial rules have changed. So that's my comment for now. And also the report itself is very, very clear on the conclusions. And I think the conclusions itself says that if this was part, and it says in bullet point, the last but one bullet point, it says if this is part of the greater taking on of putting things back into council ownership for all our leisure facilities in North Northamptonshire, then what it says is a long-term solution is in-house model for all council leisure centres, then the financial impact will be less going from the external contractor to in-house. So it says it's better for us. And reading through the report, the positives and negatives, have you not read that? It's on page 78, the second final paragraph. What it says is, however, if the long-term solution is an in-house model for all council leisure centres, then the financial impact will be less going from an external contractor to in-house. So it says it's better for us. I'm just wondering why the officers haven't picked that up in the report.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so that's my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, go on.
I'll work through I'll come back to the last point, because we might just need some clarification of that, so we know we're looking at the same thing, Councillor Pengay. So Max Associates were procured to undertake this work. We obviously already have a relationship with them because they're doing the other work, but we went through a quotation exercise, and this piece of work has cost the council £8,000. The wider piece of work is funded through public health as part of the health and wellbeing priority around physical activity. It's obviously a much bigger, longer-term piece of work, involves planning documents, and I think the value of that is just short of £100,000. In terms of the financial data that is alluded to that you're saying you haven't seen, at the point that Compass had announced that they were leaving moving away from their lease to Phoenix, then we were as a council confidentially provided with profit and loss information across the site. We obviously had some of it already because we had that relates to the management agreement for the sports facilities, and the theatre, but they did provide it, but they provided it confidentially, and we are not able to put that data in the public domain because the council doesn't own that data for the parts of the site that we don't have a management agreement with them. And that's the same with Phoenix. Phoenix are operating, so we can ask for data in relation to our management agreement for the arena sports and the theatre, but Balance Health Club, the conferencing facilities, other parts of the site that the council doesn't have any management agreement or give any money towards, that information is owned by an independent commercial company, and if they don't want to share it with us, that's one thing, but even if they do, if they say that it's given to us for a specific purpose and is commercially sensitive, we wouldn't be able to put that in the public domain.
On that, if officers get anything you can trust councillors we can meet in camera where we've not got anybody here, that information can be passed to us so we can understand it. We get loads of information that doesn't come out of the council buildings, but I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah, we have been, our legal colleagues have been involved in this process all the way through. So you asked about whether Kettering Leisure Village is part of the wider piece of work. So whilst we have to look at it differently because the other parts of the leisure estate that the council owns, we either own and operate them in-house or we own and have contracted to a leisure operator. Kettering Leisure Village is different to that, but because part of the overall piece of work around the Active Communities Framework is about looking at all of the leisure offer, so we're looking at everything from leisure and sport that's done by village halls, that's done in community centres, that's done by equestrian centres, that's done by all the sports clubs. So absolutely it's being looked at in the round, and this piece of work is really useful to feed into that wider picture. And then coming back to your final point, I may not be able to answer it now, but I just wanted to clarify which bit of which report we're talking to when you... Yes, so we have been, so we've been, finance colleagues and legal colleagues have been involved, and they have seen and been through the report, and Max Associates don't just work within this authority, they work up and down the country and advising on leisure management, and the standard is that whilst there are business rates that the council has to pay, it's different arrangements for the operators, and therefore they've taken the information that they have from their experience of providing advice across the country in order to feed that advice. If you're saying you don't agree with that, I can happy to go back and say this was a question that came up about whether those things have been challenged in court, for example, and there's any room for manoeuvre around those things. So happy to raise that.
The microphone.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, go I
think on that point, because right now what you're saying is Phoenix Leisure are running that. They're not giving it up. So this conversation is a strange conversation to have, but we're looking long term, and what we're in, does people around this table think Phoenix Leisure will be running that in 5 years' time? I don't think they will, and I think there'll be a time when somebody has to stand in, and I think we've got to get ready for that as a council. We don't know, but I think that's what it's happening up and down the country with private run organisations. Happened in Stamford and South Kesteven. They took everything and put it into a trust. So what it is it's on page 78, and it's that point you mentioned, and it's the second bottom bullet point that I refer to. But that's a long-term thing, to tell you the truth, Kerry. That what it's saying is that if you bring everything in-house, then it works out financially viable to do that and bring Kettering Leisure Village in-house as well, which is music to people's ears, I think.
So my interpretation of that paragraph, and I've obviously met with the consultants on numerous occasions, is that that paragraph is saying that from all the financial analysis and experience they have and looking at the site, an external contractor would be the most sustainable solution, certainly in the short term whilst the wider portfolio of leisure estate is considered. Because if it was operated in-house in the short term, costs would increase because we know that it is more expensive to use internal staff, largely because of our staffing costs. and so my interpretation is what they're saying, that if a longer term solution was that we were going to operate all of our estate in-house, then obviously there are economies of scale for the in-house model. That doesn't mean to say in-house delivery is less expensive than external delivery overall. I genuinely don't think we know the answers to that at this point, but we will. That's what the management option report will be doing, and that will be coming forward in early 2025.
Yeah, thank you. I think it does. My interpretation says in-house is better, and I think that's the way I recognise things. Thank you very much.
I think the point is, whichever recommendation comes out of it, in-house or external, it won't affect this particular one's running because unless Phoenix hand it in. So, you know, that's that. Councillor Fedorovich.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think I'm just going to dive straight in. I've got quite a few points, so I'll try not to take too long. But there was a couple of things initially, just sort of overarching when I was looking through the recommendations. Most of these recommendations are just to note this, and whilst I appreciate this is kind of a if we end up in that situation. Obviously, the point of scrutiny is for us to shape things, and I actually think it's at least one good thing that we've gone back and we've said, okay, there's one thing that we can challenge and change. But yes, so I mean, I think it would be nice for us to look at like what we can. Well, let me get into my other points because I think that outlines a little bit more as to what I think we maybe are missing a little bit of. So options here are sort of only needed if the company is unable to manage the site. The priority for us is to keep it open for local people, and it's mentioned in the report that the council must proactively, and you've mentioned as well, most proactively work with Phoenix to support them to ensure it's financially viable. But this is referenced, but that work specifically isn't outlined, and we've got no detail of what we're doing to support them. I'll let you come back on that before. But yes, so I mean, my sort of first question is, what work has been done to connect with other organisations that could run partnerships with regards to the soft play, events companies that could help run the conference centre, and also to seek alternative funding mechanisms? So, first one. Thanks.
Yes, so in terms of what we're doing to work with Phoenix, I think I outlined it when I introduced the report. So there are regular meetings. So we have monthly meetings both in relation to the arena sports and to the theatre, separate meetings. And we obviously do get profit and loss information in relation to that. We talk about footfall, we talk about compliance, we talk about business growth, we talk about promotion, and we are working alongside them to see what advice and support and guidance we can give. But ultimately, Phoenix are a independent private commercial operator. So we're not in a position, if they are complying with the grant agreement, to tell them what they should or shouldn't do. But it is in our interest to work with them to support, because it is an important strategic site for us. So there is ongoing work, and as I said, particularly around the theatre, where business is still rebuilding, mainly because programming for theatres is at least 12, probably 18 months to 2 years in advance. That is a slower rebuild, and so we've offered our expertise around business planning for the future, and that work is ongoing. Sorry, what was your so that was the first question. Oh, sorry, the second question was who had they spoken to other people that have got ideas about operating. So we, as I said before, last year when there was the threat of closure, a lot of people made contact with the council through councillors, and all that information was passed on to Phoenix. I know they did have some conversations, but again, as an independent business, all we can do is pass on the information and provide it to them and say, somebody's made contact here, have a conversation. But I think once the deal was brokered around Compass stepping away, the 2-month handover and Phoenix stepping in, from that point onwards, Phoenix have been committed. They've put a team in place. They've stupid staff, but they've also put extra staff in place. They want to make it work. It's their business and they're in it for the long term. So I'm sure, and I know, that they're starting to have conversations about the soft play and about conferencing, and we have, all they can do is we ask to be kept informed, but those parts of the business are theirs to run as a commercial organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chair. But actually, I'm slightly more satisfied. My personal feeling when actually we were asked to produce a business plan for this site, my personal view was that actually it was a waste of money and time doing it now because our options are limited. I'm slightly relieved that the cost was just £8,000 as it happens. I thought it could have been more than that, and of course it's just money the council are spending. It's a very odd situation to be sat here talking about what do we think we should be doing, and what are the council's options, and what the members think would be better for a site that actually doesn't give us any options. So it was asked whether Max Associates, had spoken to councillors. It's difficult to know what councillors could have contributed more than has already been contributed. Yes, I suppose councillors would have said, quite rightly, of course, that we want to do everything possible to keep the centre operating. But I don't suppose we could have said that any more passionately than the members of the public that set up the group, and I'm sure that message, got across. And of course, the council are supporting KLV because we are agreeing every year to providing a substantial amount of money to it. So it's I think with Phoenix being a private company, clearly. I'm glad to hear that we're in constant dialogue. I would have expected nothing more. Of course, it would be worrying if we weren't. It was good to hear that we're going to remind them that there are lots of other companies that would like to have an input into it. Whether they take that on board or not, I don't know. But we can remind them. What I will say, and I say this as somebody that uses certainly the theatre regularly, that speaks to the staff there. What I will say is that it's vital that all of us continue to spread positive news about the fact that the site is open. It is absolutely not helpful for us to be telling the story that we have no faith in Phoenix being around in future years. I know when I spoke to the staff when I go there, the one thing that they are worried about more than anything is that actually there is going to be negativity, that the council are going to send out a negative message which stops people wanting to buy tickets to the theatre. They don't want people not getting these tickets in advance. It's one of the things that they kept mentioning to me when I was there, that everybody has got to be positive about it, because of course it needs the public to support it, otherwise it won't survive. Just coming on to the business plan, as I say, I'm pleased that it didn't cost as much as I feared it would, and I speak as somebody that over the last 30 years has created and contributed towards more business plans than I can care to remember, whether that's through sale of company or acquisition. I say that the business plan is comprehensive. It seems all of the information that you would be looking for in a business plan seems to be in there. I can't find anything that I think I would want to see that isn't in there. It doesn't really say much that we didn't already know. If we were to take over running KLV, it is going to be expensive. But we knew that. We are fortunate, I think, that Phoenix stepped in when Compass withdrew. And I think Phoenix need our support. They're getting it financially, but I think they need our moral support as much as anything else. We need to spread the word that it's open for business. There are finances in there. Of course, they're based on estimations. What else would you expect? There is commercially sensitive financial information that we can't use. That is nothing new. That happens with every business plan or acquisition that you go through. As I say, I think this business plan, in my mind, I would have been investing the council's money on producing this in a year or 2 or 3 years' time, because at that stage there we will have more accurate data. I don't accept that Phoenix don't want this to work. I don't accept that they're not prepared to invest in the site. They are a commercial operation. They need this to work. They need it to be successful. They need it to be profitable. Chair, it's a well-written report. It contains all of the information that I think anybody that knows anything about business plans would expect to see in there. And I'm glad the council will continue to invest in it and to support it. I hope we as councillors can spread that message.
Okay, thank you. Any other, just before we go on, just to advise people that Councillor Hakewell has been videoing some of it, not all of the proceedings, as he's quite entitled to do, but it would be polite if you just pass that through the chair first, particularly if there were members of the public here who may wish not to be in camera, as they are entitled to come out of. Yes, Councillor Fedorovich.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to continue my points, if that's okay. So just thank you also for the response on that. I appreciate the fact that they are a business entity and that they have got the information, that we've passed everything to them. I guess my challenge to that is the fact that I kind of see the council and us as councillors as conveners. We have that power to bring people together, and yes, we don't have to, but we have the power to do it. We have the power to influence, and I think that is really quite important. So I don't know. I mean, also the amount of energy that is still in the community, the amazing people that were coming forward with some brilliant ideas. It's just sometimes that might be that they need reminding. They're just like people, aren't they? So they might need reminding of some of these great things that are out there. So I wanted to kind of query. I might come back to that actually. Engagement with the community and councillors, I kind of think that we've kind of covered that. But I do think there's a lot that could be fed in. We've got sort of, a lot of Kettering councillors, town councillors as well, who would have a lot of feedback into this, and again could come into that convening picture. Not so much of these options, but I think possibly for just actually making it sustainable as a business option. So with the purpose of the report, there are 3 things that we are trying to tackle in this report as well, which is to agree to receive a comprehensive business case, including association options, endorse the agreement in principle to agree revisions of the provisions of the lease to support the site to remain open. I'm not confident that we've done that second part, because we've got obviously these various different options, but without... From my understanding, unless I've misunderstood something, we've still got a lease clause that if Phoenix are unable to support the site, we're still going to have to close for 2 days, unless I've misunderstood something. But we're essentially saying, from what I understood from that report, that we're not going to touch that lease agreement, and that we still have that risk, essentially.
Go on.
Thank you.
Mr. Wadsworth, answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. Ultimately the lease was what was agreed in 2000, so we can't arbitrarily or unilaterally make changes to the lease. The lease stands as a legal document, and the clauses are in there as were in there. But what we were able to do last year was make that concession, which enabled Phoenix to step in and run the centre and stop it from closing. And obviously we have an ongoing dialogue with them in terms of that concession period that was agreed at the time, and what further concession may be appropriate in terms of helping to continue and rebuild the business at Kettering Leisure Village. But at the moment there's no further changes proposed to that lease, and certainly it's unlikely that Phoenix would accept something unless there was a benefit for them to do so. But ultimately we're not in control of the site is the issue, and that lease is in place till 2116.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. Through the chair, a lot of actually what I'd written down has been mentioned. I mean, we are talking about legal agreement that means we're talking what ifs and buts. But something that Councillor Watts brought up, it would be good if the different groups could actually meet with Phoenix and discuss things, because they might have things they could come up with. But when it comes down to it, as Councillor Wilkes pointed out, Phoenix are a commercial enterprise. They want it to work. They're not going to put their time and effort into something to fail. So I think we've got to look positively at it. And it's been mentioned that theatres take a while to actually put out their work. They actually work at least 2 years in advance, because, and I'll give them a plug here and now, why not? Let's get people out there. Legally Blonde starts in the theatre in 2 weeks' time, and they're going to be putting on Little Mermaid. So we want to know that people are going to be out there to support all that. But at the moment, we are in the position that because of the legalities, we are saying what if and but. So we have just got to leave it in the hands, I feel, of Phoenix at the moment and be here and listen.
Okay, thank you. We've had an hour on this, so perhaps we'll wrap this up. Have you got another point to make, Councillor Pengelly?
Yeah, Councillor Wilkes said he welcomes a business plan. I can't find a business plan on this in this report.
I think it's referring to the Max report as a business plan.
Yeah, that's not a business plan. That's projected costings.
Oh.
Yeah, and just one final part. We're spending £100,000 going forward on another report. Could we get some reassurances that with that many £100,000, that there will be member seminars and, more importantly, seminars for the public to talk to Max Associates going forward, because none of us have spoken to them on this, and I think it's important. If we're spending £100,000, we get to say why we want certain aspects of all our own areas to be looked after by the council going forward, and that includes Ruston, Corby, Kettering, Wellingborough.
I think there's already been a consultation online. Many of us will have done.
So Max Associates have run a variety of surveys. They have met with members. We ran 2 sessions with members. We've taken it to the relevant EAPs. We have, they've had surveys with the public, surveys with schools, surveys with sports clubs, surveys with the voluntary sector, surveys with our operators, obviously, and with users of the current centres. They've all happened last year to get to the point where we've got a draft active community strategy. The work around the facilities, obviously, is more of a planning document, so it's based on condition surveys largely, but also looking at usage of those centres that we own. And then the playing pitch strategy follows the absolute planning rules and regulations, which means that we have to engage directly with users of those pitches through the national governing bodies, etc., etc. All that work is still ongoing, Chair.
I'm not, having been involved with a few, I'm not sure national governing bodies always know what goes on the pitch, but there we go. Okay, so we've got 5 recommendations on page 14, plus a 6th that says considered any comments. So we're being asked to make recommendations to the executive, as normal. I'd like to pick up Councillor Pengelly's suggestion at the start that we thank the officers who've, it's been a considerable piece of work at short notice that they weren't expecting to do. And with I think as good a resolution as we could have ever hoped for. So I think we'll pick that one up. I don't know if anybody's got any other particular ones, but I think we can have a recognition that it's very important to the community and health and well-being and many other things. I mean, I won't do the full wording now. I think we can build on that. But is there anything we particularly want to? And the other thing, I think, where number 5, which says endorses, I think we would encourages as well. And I don't know whether. So, Councillor Wilkes, have you got something to? Any recommendations for?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the basis that a business plan, whatever terminology people want to use, is by its very definition projections. This isn't a one-off. It can't be, because what the council is trying to do, of course, is prepare for the eventuality that something negative should happen. So, I mean, what I would suggest to the executive, I mean, I say this as if they don't already know, but this can't be a one-off, and it should be regularly revisited. Because the figures will change. In fact, they will become more accurate. The projections will be coupled up with actual costings. So it's something that should be revisited annually, maybe, but it isn't a one-off piece of work.
So something to make sure it's looked at regularly, and possibly to make sure we have a plan B, which is perhaps not the right word, but the idea is right, for so that we're prepared.
Yes.
If anything goes wrong. Councillor Fedorovich.
Thank you, Chair. I've on page 31, 7.5.1, we took in the report. It mentions about there's not been any formal public consultation of the recommendations in this report, and we've obviously talked about like surveys and things like that. But I really do think whether or not there were surveys that went out, the awareness was not there, and I think there's so many groups that would benefit from being engaged in this piece of work. My recommendation would be that we engage local town and parish councils as a starting point for them to hopefully do some engagement events, or be encouraged to do some engagement events, and seek some informal opinion from the general public. The consultation side is so vital for this.
Are you asking for Phoenix to engage with these people, or the council?
Phoenix.
Yeah. So we can't make them, but we can perhaps
these weren't our
suggest
surveys.
that officers recommend to them. That would be
Yeah.
would do. Yeah. Okay, I'm sure they are engaging, but emphasise that.
Mine's an amendment to option 4, Chair, and it's only a small amendment, and it is everything stay the same, because what we're saying that, and I think the officers have said they think Phoenix are going to have this for the next 100 years, whatever. There's no risk, but the report does say that if they do give up control of it, and what we say will go to a private company. If no private company came forward, that means it's closed. So I think there should be an option to say, if no private company came forward, we will look at all options for the council giving full support for it. Something like that. I think that's what we'd want to do anyway. We wouldn't want to be see that place closed. So if no private company came forward, we look at all options to for the council to give full support for it.
Yeah. Obviously, it says most sustainable, so it doesn't rule out others. But we can't fetter the exact what they've got to do. But we can maybe suggest that that they will look at other options. Yeah, consider other options. Okay.
Just on that, Chair, in the section of the report that talks about if we were in that position where Phoenix literally walked away and relinquished the lease, then all options are on the table. From do nothing, which technically means that the council would take it no steps at all, through to the options that are available to us. So absolutely, at that point in time, we would need to make
recommendations.
Okay, I mean, we may need to put the wording more correct, but in those, are we all happy with those recommendations? Yep, all happy. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Pennell, and are you staying for the rest, or you're being chauffeured? Okay, thank you for that.
Chair,
Sorry.
just a query. I find it quite hard to endorse what the council has done without having a lot of it in this report. I just don't know if that's the right wording there.
All we're doing is the approach.
We have heard a fair bit of it verbally, which is fair, but it's quite unless that's going to be added to the report. I just think it's quite difficult to do that.
Well, we have the officer's assurance of a proactive approach. I think that's.
I think Chair, if we're talking about the bit that's about endorsing the concession, is that what we're talking about?
So in the recommendation, it endorses the hang on, let me find it. Endorses the current proactive approach of the leisure and asset management team in working with the PLMS to support ongoing growth and development of future plans. I just don't think it's been outlined really in this report.
I mean, ultimately, the steps that we would take is managing the landlord and tenant relationship that exists through the lease, but then also the management agreement through Kerry's team in terms of how that works and the bits of the building that we do provide a grant towards the operating. So that's the proactive steps that we can take. So essentially, it's looking at what we can do as a council, as both a landlord and through the management agreement.
I don't think we'd arrived at this point, particularly the extension that was done last year, if they hadn't gone through with a proactive approach and greased the wheels as well. Councillor Wilkes.
Chair, can I just say, because and it may help my fellow councillor, the reason that I'm really comfortable with number 5 is because I think the proof that the council have been as proactive as they possibly could have been is that it didn't close. So we were faced with complete closure. If it hadn't have been for the proactive approach of officers and the council to bring Phoenix to the table, we've had some concessions with the lease, but if we hadn't have been that proactive, it would have closed by now. So I think that there couldn't have been a bigger demonstration of that proactivity. There's more to come. I mean, I absolutely accept that, and I'm glad we've added some bits in. But I'm completely comfortable with it, because a council that hadn't been proactive would be sat now discussing the fact that KLV are closed, and should we have done more? So,
I think more people are content with it than not. So. Okay, so thank you for that. We'll finalise the recommendations and let people have them. On now to the next matter, which is waste management 3-year plan. With no speakers, so straight in, Mr. Kane.
Thank you, Chair, very much. Evening, everybody. So as a reminder, this is the waste management 3-year plan, which was agreed by the executive back in September 2022. And it was, as the name suggests, a 3-year plan for the service to outline what its priorities were for the coming years, and to give a timeline of when it was going to deliver those actions. Just as a reminder, the waste service for a unitary authority like ours consists of the waste collection. It's all the curbside collections that we all enjoy as residents, for a residual bin or a general waste bin, a recycling bin, for some of us in East Northants and Corby, the food waste bin, and the garden waste bin for those who subscribe to that service, as well as access to our network of household waste recycling centres. So the team manages that through an existing contract. And we also manage the contracts to dispose all of that waste through different means, trying to always seek best value, of course, for the taxpayer, but also seeking the most environmentally appropriate route for the waste as well, trying to maximise recycling and composting as much as we possibly can. They do other things as well. They do environmental enforcement, where we encourage people to dispose of their waste appropriately, obviously, and legally. We do that through communication and correspondence, but also where we find that people won't comply with the law, we do undertake enforcement as well, including monitoring, of course, of hotspot sites to try and identify who's carrying out that activity, and then following up through enforcement action all the way through the courts, if necessary, to try and get the outcome we're looking for, which is for people to dispose of their waste responsibly. We also manage a number of closed landfills, which are legacy sites for the authority. Most of them sort of don't need active management. There's one in Corby that needs more active management, so that is under our control as well, to monitor that and to maintain it. So just going through the report then, Chairman, if I may, if I just take you to 4.6 is a list of the actions that have been completed. So you'll see that the team have done a brilliant job, and the action plan's not completed yet. We're only halfway through, but we thought it was appropriate to bring an update at this point. So they've done a huge amount of work and been very successful. I won't go through every single bullet point. You can read that in your own time, and no doubt you already have. But a great deal of work has been undertaken, and the real purpose for this was to make sure that we had, particularly for those first ones, contracts in place that Northamptonshire had actually procured. So we were absolutely confident of the basis of those contracts. We were confident that we've got best value for money in the current market, and also that we have a contract covering our whole area. So all of the recycling now across Northamptonshire goes through the same contract. All of the green waste goes through the same contract, etc. So we've harmonised a huge amount. And these are things I appreciate that residents won't know anything about. This is what we do. This is why the service exists. But without those things, the service would not carry on, and we wouldn't be emptying bins on a daily basis. So they are absolutely essential to our delivery of our service. Going on then, as I say, I won't go through all of the options, all of the actions, but going through to 4.7 then, there's a list of things that haven't yet been completed. All of them except one actually are not due for completion yet, and I'll explain the exception in just a second, but they are all in hand. So good progress is being made against all of them. So we are in a very good place with the action plan, and we've either completed everything or we're making good progress. The only one that we haven't completed yet, which should have been completed last year, is in relation to the introduction of waste electrical and electronic equipment, known as WEEE in the sector, from the doorstep. You can take electrical equipment to your local HWRC, so your household waste recycling centre, and you can dispose of that free of charge there. But some authorities, and indeed East Northamptonshire introduced, before unitary came along, they introduced a curbside collection of small electrical items, so things like hair dryers, maybe a toaster, electric toothbrush, that sort of size of thing, where you could put them out alongside your other recycling or your general waste in a separate bag, and they would be collected by the same crew and then taken down a different disposal route. East Northamptonshire introduced that, and we would like to introduce that in Wellingborough, Kettering and Corby. The reason, as the report explains, why we haven't done that is primarily because government are continuing to consult and engage with the sector on a range of different possible commitments and requirements they will have for local authorities, and one of them that they are consulting on is the curbside collection of electrical items. So it's not really in the local authority's interest at the moment to introduce something which the government might require in future and might change the parameters or requirements. For instance, we might find that the East Northamptonshire arrangements at the moment might have to change if the government require us to do things slightly differently. Maybe they'll require a larger range of electrical items to be collected. We don't know yet. So it makes sense to pause on that one till we know what the government's guidance is, and then we'll pick it up again and run with it once that's been clarified. And whilst we can never really guess when that might come forward in the government's agenda, they do appear to be consulting on that at least this calendar year. So we will see more about that, even if it's not an immediate requirement. We'll understand a bit more about what direction that might be going in. So that's the list of things that are in train, and we will develop over the next 18 months of the action plan. There is one item I would like to particularly pull out for the Scrutiny Committee to consider this evening, if that's all right, because we would welcome your views on it. And that's in relation to the contract in East Northamptonshire, which was undertaken by the former district council in that area for the collection of waste in East Northamptonshire. So there's a contract there that's delivered by FCC. So they collect all of the waste from curbside, recycling, general and garden waste and food waste. And then they take it to the disposal points that we tell them to go to. That contract is due to end in 2025. There is an option to extend it for up to 7 years, which the authority can take. Obviously, it does require FCC to agree. It's not a unilateral decision that we would take, but we would engage with FCC if that was the choice of the local authority. And we could extend it for up to 7 years if we chose to do so. What we would be interested to hear from the Scrutiny Committee is the basis by which the executive should make this decision, because the executive will have to make this decision as to whether they want to enter into an extension with FCC or whether they wish to do something differently. Now, as a reminder, in Kettering and Corby and Wellingborough, we have an in-house service. So it's all delivered by our in-house crews who are employed directly by the council, and we manage them directly. So FCC is the only collection service at the moment that is, East Northampton is the only collection service at the moment that is delivered by a contractor. So we will be putting a recommendation to the executive in due course, but before we do so, we were keen to hear from the Scrutiny Committee as to what the basis should be that the executive should be asked to consider this. Trying to sort of create two options, if you like, within this. One is that the executive could decide to bring this in-house because the other three are in-house, and therefore we'll have everything in-house. That might be the basis for the decision, that might be the rationale. Alternatively, they might want to make an individual decision about that individual contract and the services in East Northamptonshire. So in that case, the decision might be based on the financial and operational performance of the contractor. So is it performing well financially and operationally? And make a decision based on that information and that data, which might, of course, lead to a conclusion that actually, yes, it is. It's performing well operationally and financially, so we should leave it where it is for the time being. And we should extend for a period of time. Now, as I say, that period of time could be up to 7 years, dependent on FCC agreeing. So that would be different to making a decision, but just, in order to have it all in-house, actually make a different decision and continue to operate the service with East Northamptonshire being a different delivery model to the rest of the authority, which we can do. As professionals within the waste service, we can do that. We've managed it successfully for the last 3 years, and we can continue managing it that way. So I welcome some thoughts, Chair, from the committee. Thank
Okay,
you. And we're happy to take questions on any of the report, of course. And I've got my colleague, Charlotte, here to help me.
Councillor Urban.
Thank you. A very interesting report. Thank you for presenting it. I've just got a few questions and comments, really. So first of all, I'm looking at 4.6, the things that you've completed. Figure like waste composition, in the waste composition analysis section, says 14.47% could have been recycled, and then 34% was food waste, which, had there been the opportunity for recycling, maybe that could have gone. I was just wondering how those figures compared with other authorities. They sound high to me, but I don't know if they're high, so I don't know whether you could address that. I wanted to mention 2 paragraphs below, 70,000 users for the garden waste service. Sounds like a fantastic number, so, you know, well done for the rollout of that last year. My thoughts on external contractors and in-house. It seems odd to be envisaging having 2 separate provisions within the same authority. I don't say it's necessarily wrong, but I do wonder if the provider in East Northamptonshire is so good, and I'm sure they are, should we be looking at asking them to take over the rest of Northamptonshire? I don't know, rather than us saying, well, for the sake of efficiency or I don't know, that we should be taking over them. Is it odd from a local authority point of view? But yeah, that is my main question. And one other question, sorry. 7.2.3 under legal and governance, where you summarise what the Environmental Protection Act 1990 requires us to do. I used to be under the impression that recycling generated income for councils. Then I learned, well, with the garden waste, it doesn't. Do any of these actually, are they earners in any way, shape or form? That would be useful to know. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. And I'll ask Charlotte to respond to those, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So to go through in order that you asked them, in terms of the food waste figures in the residual bin, sadly, that's about what we would expect. And even in the places where we've got food waste in, so we've got it into Corby and into East Northants, we're still seeing about a third. So I think it just underpins why this is a really, really good time to standardise that and to bring it on, and actually where we need to be focusing some of our attention in terms of officers in really getting residents to engage with that, because actually sort of moving forward, that is one of the biggest areas where we can see a benefit to economics, to carbon. You know, there's a whole range of factors where food security, all of those things. So it's a really, really good win all round. And it's sort of, and we welcome being able to bring that online. So again, that would be something we'll ask everyone to get behind in terms of communicating that when that's ready. In terms of is it odd to have 2 operators? I think I'd just ask you to think about this. Actually, the container is picked up and taken to a place and emptied and disposed of. And who does that are the same people, whether we have them as an external or not. The guys on the ground and the ladies on the ground are exactly the same guys and girls that they would be. So the thing on the side of the truck, what's important is we give a good, effective and cost-effective service. So I think we probably, you know, if both models was what was best for the council, officers would operate that, because that's what we've been doing, as we said, for the last 3 years. It's really about sort of delivering the most cost-effective and efficient service that we can in the difficult, challenging circumstances that we do. And then sort of that segues more onto the income for councils for recycling. The heady days where they were, and there were some of you will have been around at that time when it was, the costs of processing that material is getting in more and more and more and more. Not to mention that the sites themselves that process them take power and water and have to pay staff. And so again, all of those costs that are increasing to businesses will also increase into your disposal costs. So again, that's why we are looking to channel that waste into the cheapest disposal options that we can. And actually, this is why recycling is so important, because it is that bit cheaper than putting it into the residual bin. So hopefully that answers your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Anslow was next.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting report, as you said. So just a couple of questions then. I'm picking up on what Councillor Irwin said. So 70,000 users of the green waste bin. What percentage of that is of the whole possible number of users? So, are we anywhere near 100% of what we would expect? Or that's one question. I'll give you a chance to find that one out. And of course, the green waste was something that was harmonised with, because East Northants paid, we all paid, but we paid in different ways for our green waste, garden waste, I should say, before the harmonisation. So East Northants have managed to, have got a different contractor. I'd like to know, I suppose the question is does it cost more? And because as far as I'm concerned, I feel as though the first option is the best, is that, well, why don't we all come all in-house like we have done in Wellingborough? Wellingborough came in-house from Norse. The Norse contract came up for renewal. We decided that wouldn't be renewed, and Wellingborough then became, it was brought in-house. Okay, there were a few teething problems, as anything new happens, but in the end, we're all having our bins emptied, aren't we, Councillor Owen? Yeah, and there's no problems, is there now? There were at the beginning, yeah, and we had lots of people asking questions, but we now know that it's working. So to me, I think that we ought to be saying that it should all be in-house. But if there is a real financial incentive for East Northants to keep their FFC or FCC, whatever it is, then, yeah, maybe we should consider that. On another point, just to say, the public waste bins found on streets and in parks and gardens, they're not all recycled, are they? Not all bins are, divided in the middle into regular, general and recycling. Is that something that's on the cards? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's go in reverse order, do the easy ones first. Street litter bins, at the moment, no. Most of the material from street litter bins is not recyclable. Predominantly, that's down to the fact that they are contaminated. We have some units in store, and we are looking to put some pilots out, but they will take quite a lot of monitoring to ensure that actually the material from them is usable. So it's one of those things, we're going gently, because again, once you put it out, you don't want to take it away again and turn people off that. So it's really about finding the right location for that to sort of go gently. But they are, and it's something we are always open to. And moving forward, I think we will need to do more, but we've got a lot to do around the street litter bins. So in terms of why was Norse different? Why would we? So the Norse contract was at an end, and there was no opportunity to extend it. So that immediately took that option off the table for the council to consider. Had it been, it may well have been an option that we asked members to consider at that time, because having been on the project team to bring it in, it was extremely short time frame, and I think we all noticed it was a bit of a bumpy introduction, and we wouldn't normally look to deliver services like that. So as everything is driven, much as we don't want it to be about the cost, while it's a very, very high level look at it, there is a significant difference the wrong way, which means it's not just a straightforward, let's all bring it in-house conversation. Now, that said, that's looking at what the costs are today. Now, that contract was let 7 years ago. So it wouldn't, you know, and so to go out to procurement today and then say, well, what's that going to cost against in-house might look very different, and we recognise that. And we would want to do quite a bit more work around not just what does a 7-year-old contract that's been relatively well managed and has managed to keep inflation and the costs increases at a minimum, what does that look like when we go back out to the open market and back to bidders? Because that is two very different things. And so, again, it's not quite as simple as to simply say that, but it is a guide to what, that's a bit of a benchmark to our in-house services. So that was the two. What was the third question? Percentage of garden waste. So we are at about, of total residents, total households, we're at about 47%. Now that's total, so that it doesn't include flats, other places that you know take out. So we're probably, of what we'd expect or what we could realistically achieve, somewhere to about 50%, I would say.
Thank you. Councillor Fedorovich was next, and then Councillor Nicoll and Councillor Bengali.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this as well. Really exciting. There's lots of good things going on. Yeah, really, really useful to learn about this. And obviously, I know it's kind of an early report, but it's really, really good. I had a couple of points. In terms of food collection, there was a little bit of discrepancy, and I don't know if you could clarify this. So on page 87, well, on page 89, it said that the food waste timescales were looking at being bumped to 2026 rather than 2025. Meanwhile, on page 87, it says food waste is due to be procured for April 2024. So a bit of clarity on that would be wonderful. And I'm hoping it would be this year because people have been asking about it for many a year. In terms of the commercial, I didn't see anything here in terms of commercial recycling, and this has come up very recently from quite a number of councillors and members of the public, actually, really, really out of nowhere, but this has been apparently a conversation happening for a long time. The fact that we don't have commercial recycling for businesses and community centres is mind-blowing to me. I don't know why we don't have this, and it's been news to me finding out that we don't. So my big question is, why don't we have it? Can we have this? Then you've got, I know that the team were looking at recycling centre booking and opening hours bits, and I don't know where that fits in this, but it would be lovely to know a bit more, because I think when people think about their household recycling, waste recycling centres, they do think about accessibility. That's a really big part of the conversation. With regards to the electrical recycling, there was a couple of bits here. So in terms of curbside recycling, I'd like to know if it actually reduces the carbon footprint of e-waste, because obviously if we're going around with more vans than originally, I mean, if people are already going to the waste recycling centres and they would just take that anyway, it's actually, we could be creating more carbon by going out and collecting them. I'd like to know about that. And also I want to know if the items get ruined in transit and how that actually looks. Obviously these are e-waste items, so they're probably not in the best condition anyway, but some things might be fixable, and I don't know what that looks like being taken away in transit. Also, the mention of bags as well, having more single-use plastic than is needed if someone's just going to take it to the recycling centre. That's an additional carbon and not very sustainable thing to be introducing, so I just kind of want to query that. I also wanted to mention regarding waste, like electrical waste, Intutech and Kettering are working to reduce e-waste, and that's something that I really think the council should be connecting with. So the reorganisation of the waste team on page 90, sorry, I've got a few bits. The reorganisation of the waste team, we haven't really got some clarity on what that looks like, but I appreciate this is probably quite early, so, but yes, so I think that would be lovely to get a bit more insight into that. Public consultation. So given the requirement to collect recycling in line with the government strategy, there is less value in consulting the public on these matters. I haven't got a note of where that line's from, but I massively disagree. I think we should be educating the public and should still be consulting, at least possibly informally, but just like the public need to understand the limitations. If we have to abide by a national strategy, this should really be outlined and made clear if we can. Education, I know, is a massive part of what the waste team does as well. So in terms of the East Northants contract, though, as well, I think the big thing is cost, and we're weighing up that as well. But I would also like to ask if we could weigh up the difference in carbon. So who is most likely to be able to short-term transition to electric or hydrogen vehicles? Because I think that's a really big question. And the sooner we do that, the better. On that note as well, so the decarbonisation work, I thought that was really, really good to see. And my query was what that looks like in terms of expanding, leasing other refuse trucks, like when that will be. Also, if is hydrogen an option, I think that would be really useful to know, because obviously that's usually the case with bigger vehicles. Right, I'm going to throw a curveball at you now. So something, we mentioned composting in here, but we haven't really mentioned anything in terms of anaerobic digesters or more interesting composting techniques, blatty composting, which I find really fascinating, and I think it would be fantastic. For those that don't know what blatty composting is, it's cockroach composting. It's used in other countries, and it's absolutely fascinating. But yeah, cockroaches can consume the waste, and then their excrement is just brilliant. It's amazing, and it doesn't smell at all. It's really, really fascinating. And for having something like that in Northamptonshire, I think that would be really exciting. Yeah. So some different kind of innovation. I thought that would be really interesting for us to explore. I think that probably brings me to the end, so I'm going to shut up now. But thank you very much.
Thank you. That is a new one on me, cockroach.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, right. So hopefully I can wrap up a couple of the points in one answer. So in terms of the HWRC, as we've said there, we're now in the process of trying to identify a provider. Part of that, we're in the very, very early stages, and part of that in going out to market is to get their thoughts on how they might operate it. And really that's an opportunity to see whether there is anything innovative that hasn't been thought about, hasn't been discussed. So I'd envisage that those parts of how that's used will progress along that part of that project. That's certainly what I'd expect to see anyway. And I think there are plans within that project to engage with various members along the way in terms of that. So hopefully that answers that. In terms of the food waste, so why have we done food waste disposal now? Well, we already collect it in Corby and East Northants, so we still have to find a way of disposing that for now. So we needed to put a contract in place that dealt with the material we're already collecting. You'll be glad to know it is ready, so as and when we bolt on the new services, that will just feed into the same contract. So it's just one thing we've done in a very Blue Peter style, really, that will just enable us to bring it on. Are we going to roll it out before 26? That remains to be seen at the moment, and we are going as absolutely fast as we can. From the day the letter was announced to us, which was just before Christmas, we've sort of gone through the steps fairly quickly, and it was approved at exec last week that we could start with the procurement. So this year's focus is to get those build slots for vehicles and the containers in, because everybody else in the land is trying to do the same thing, and there are only so many providers. So how early we'll be able to roll it out will entirely depend on how quickly we can get build slots and what day those vehicles are going to be delivered to us. Because as soon as we've started to look at getting them in the depot, we can then look at realistic dates to get them on. So, but that is the deadline. So that's the sort of latest point that we're working to. But if we can accelerate anything, then we surely will. So that hopefully that answers those questions around food waste. Curbside recycling, as Graham alluded to, that's kind of why we're pausing really. The small was an add-on to they didn't need any more vehicles. It was just using a small amount of space that was not being used to take those things, which enabled us to take them back intact. So they worked. So there was that potential for reuse or recovery. The bigger items, that's when it starts to get more problematic, more costly, more carbon. And that's kind of why we've said, well, hang on a minute. Let's understand what government are saying we need to do, and then we can try and find a more sustainable solution. Okay, on the green vehicles and with FCC, both of those two things, one of the benefits that there is with the site that we are currently on is that there is early hydrogen. So it's still very much in the test phases, but it's green hydrogen. It's produced on site, so it would give the potential for that to be delivered there. And there is also electricity on site. It is already a green power generation site. So that is one of the potential benefits to to the council in terms of our carbon agenda as to whether whether there's actually more we wanted to do with that site. And this is again one of the reasons why it's not quite as clear cut, because there are lots of opportunities as well as things we need to consider very carefully. So I think hopefully that answers E&C, hydrogen, composting. Yes, so again, food waste is going to anaerobic digestion. That is the current outlet that we use in terms for all the food waste. It isn't when we send the garden waste, because it's quite an expensive way to treat all of the garden waste, but all of the food waste, which has more technical requirements in terms of how it's processed, in terms of making sure it meets standards for the environment. So, and that would meet all of those. So our food waste, then the output is able to go back into agricultural use. So hopefully, I think that covers.
Through you, Chair, just where are those anaerobic digesters? Are they in the county or are they?
Yes, so they're all just, well, I think we've got one just outside, about a mile outside the boundary, at Wymington on the A6. And then there's at least one other site that's in county at the moment. And it will depend, quite depending on the final outcomes of the disposal site. But as I said, they're all within a proximity.
Councillor Nichols next.
Thank you. Like other members, I think I found the waste analysis really interesting. If you add together all the percentages on there, you're looking at just over 50% of further recycling, which we can optimise. I know you spoke about this earlier, but what active campaigns are we currently running as a council to encourage more people to go for their recycling and make sure they're maximising that? Because that seems like quite a large percentage. And then secondly, obviously, the council's exploring electric vehicles, further hydrogen options. What's our current fleet? You mentioned we have one current electric vehicle which we're leasing, and then some smaller vehicles. What's our current number at?
I think Mr. Wadsworth might be better to answer as he orders them.
Do you mean in terms of the number of vehicles we have, or the number of electric vehicles?
Yeah, electric.
Electric. So we've got 8 on the way, which are vans, and then we've got the one electric refuse vehicle at the moment in Wellingborough. It's probably worth just noting the rest of the fleet that's in-house. That's on a contract that runs till 2027, and then there's another tranche that runs till about 2030. So in terms of that opportunity to look at moving to alternative technologies, we've got time to consider that, but obviously we can't necessarily do something instantly in terms of changing those contractual arrangements that are in place. What I would say is that a lot of that technology, whilst it is working well in terms of the vehicle we've got, and other councils are successfully using them, there is a considerable cost attached to them. So just roughly, the electric refuse vehicle is probably about twice as much as leasing a normal diesel one. So there is a financial consideration in terms of to what extent we can convert, as well as all the operational aspects in terms of kind of towing capacity, carrying loads and things like that have to be considered.
Thank you. Councillor Pengelly was next.
Yeah, a couple of points. First point is, and it's not in the report today, but there's got to be a report coming forward soon on where our rubbish goes to, what we do with our rubbish at the end of the day, and whether we incinerate, whether we bury, and whatever, because I think all our contracts come to an end. So I'm sure there'll be a report coming forward on that soon. Several years ago, we were all in different councils, and there were some really, really good councils and really bad councils. But what we did, we all came together, because on the economy of scales, it said having one council is better. I don't know if that's true or not with things that have gone on, but that's what we said. And we've just had, in this report, we talked about green waste, we talked about harmonisation. And on harmonisation, we all had to pay for it. The arguments against it, but that's what we did. So therefore, when Charlotte mentioned that if you're a man or woman emptying a bin in Kettering, you're the same as a man and woman emptying a bin in East Northampton. That's not true, because you're on different rates of pay, you've got different union agreements and everything else. I think it's better if we harmonise everything into one and have the council running it all. The economies of scale for savings for everybody is enormous, because there are different route optimisation projects out there, and what you can do is you can say that that Corby route is going to go into East Northants, or that East Northants route is going to go into Wellingborough. Your commercial waste, when the Kettering and Corby, and we worked brilliantly, Conservative Labour Council worked brilliantly in bringing, and we did it with APSI, in bringing the contracts together. A big part of that was commercialisation, and what we were going to do was do more on collecting waste from shops, from factories and other things. That's never happened, because I know the pressures that have been on officers, but that's where you can make some big money as a council, go against all these private contractors and optimise the vehicles. You're using the vehicles twice a day instead of having 10 or 11 vehicles. The other thing that this report fails to do, and it is a good report, is that some of the older councils, or councils that have been around a bit longer, will remember the Northamptonshire Waste Partnership, where we did some really good work on education. And it's about creating less waste. Because we all create waste, but it's about not using so waste. You go around the backs of Asda and whatever, there's so much cardboard boxes. So it's about creating waste. And what we're doing about going out and educating people about doing less, putting less in the bin, collecting less, using recycle shops where you can buy coffee beans or whatever. What we're doing about that, because it seems to have gone, and I do understand the pressures you're all under with all these new contracts, but would that be a good way to go forward? And the final thing is and the household waste recycling centres, is there any talk about what's happening with the Corby one? Because we got told a few months ago that didn't have long to go. What will be happening to that, and where will we be having a household recycling centre in Corby that is fit for use and fit for purpose? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, hopefully pick up on a couple of points. So, route optimisation, completely agree, and it's already happening. And actually having two different providers in terms of route optimisation isn't going to be a barrier. We'll accelerate that. That's actually key to a number of other things that we need to do. So that will happen irrespective of the who. So don't worry about that. And something I meant to pick up with from Councillor Fedorovic earlier, commercial recycling, also in train. It was probably because there was so much here, we sort of went, okay, and that is something that's going to be mandatory. So because it's mandatory, I've sort of gone, oh, we need to move on that. There is some rudimentary recycling across. It's inconsistent, and it really focuses a little bit on the big four, so it isn't really going to be fit for purpose for what we want for Northamptonshire's stuff. So commercial is another thing that's in the pipeline. And yeah, and back to that reorganisation, as you said, we've got a relatively small team. You can all see they've been busy. So, you know, these are all the things in train. So again, just want to reassure you, again, we're sort of there, and we won't wait to realise those efficiencies where we can. Education, absolutely, and that's again something I'm very hopeful that as we get through the reorganisation, we can reinstil some proper education resources. It's very much been linked to the waste enforcement team at the moment. It's been a bit more compliance. So we'd like to get back to some of the fun stuff. I'd like to, you know, back with a green costume on somewhere. So, you know, but it has been, you know, the focus has been a little bit about just sort of tackling some of our really bad areas. You know, some of the bin stores, you know, we've had emails around some of the housing associations, things like that. So, yeah, our focus has been on the real worst stuff. And we want to try and sort of do some of those. And then, yeah, as we move through and get into a reorg, hopefully I'll have a lovely education officer to introduce you to. Thank you.
Thank you. My turn. I'm going to start by thanking you and your team. We had a clear up in Wellingborough on Saturday morning, and we got 40 bags of rubbish. I think we got 8 or 9 shopping trolleys, a trampoline out of the river, and thank you for answering the phone. But it was all picked up by your team within minutes, actually, of being put there. And a couple of days before, I reported another bin that was overflowing. The next day, I went back, and it was the overflowing bit was all cleared. So, thank you for your. Yeah. I think going back over my points, I think it would have been bumpy if we'd given Norse an extension, actually, but that's given the investment they were making. When it comes to the extension of the collection, I mean, I must admit, I was a bit surprised when I saw that the HWRC figures worked out quite so well in favour of an outside contractor, but they did, and you need the figures before you get the answer on the collection rounds. But it just strikes me that having an external contractor on the depots that we've got in Corby and Wellingborough and Kettering might be an issue, whereas it's all right at Chelveston because it's FCC's yard. I mean, against that FCC, I have been very, very good as Norse were bad at the end of the day. So, and I think obviously external contractors will have the economies of scale that we were talking about just now. But I think the figures will be important. But I think either way, I'm sure they'll be successful. So I mean, members might like to endorse whichever they think. I'd be interested to hear a bit more about the restructure. We're 3 years in now, and will that restructure affect whether we go in-house or out-house, or vice versa? It might be that if we go in-house, we need a different team and a different structure than if we're going completely out-house. So that would be interesting to hear a bit more about and how we're getting on there, because obviously having a known structure of staff and where to go to is quite useful in that. Education, I've picked up that as well. I mean, I remember when NCC had a 7.5-ton truck that would go around all the schools, and it's probably been disposed of by now. But that was one way of educating, and our little darlings, when they get home, they certainly tell parents what they should and shouldn't be doing. So it's a very good way of passing on education. The food vehicle, I know that you've got 2 separate vehicles for the Kettering Corby food collect. Will it be in future separate vehicles again, or are you thinking of having a cage or whatever on the vehicles you order in future, so that it's all on one vehicle? Obviously, I look forward to the Wii, because that reduced fly tipping and the bulky stuff that gets fly tips. There was a cooker sitting in the middle of Market Street for nearly a week. Somebody dumped it in the middle of town. Having a proper collection would have helped, I would have thought. Garden waste. When are the stickers coming out? I keep getting asked, because lots of people are saying they've paid their money and not got their stickers. And one of the things that I noticed going around the town doing the litter pick is the number of bins that are broken or burnt out. People have been burning them. And of course that means that the litter just comes out the bottom. And so has anybody done a analysis of the state of some of the bins, and also the ones that I see, a lot of the chewing gum and cigarette ones, they're just broken and they're flying open and they're not doing their job. So somebody needs to do a bit of an analysis. And I know it's a cost, and that we haven't got money, but it's absolutely no point in people putting stuff in the bin and it just flying off again. So those are a few of my bits.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll take a couple of those and I'll leave Charlotte to a few others. So on the waste structure, I appreciate Councillor Federovich, you asked about this as well. So yeah, I appreciate it has been 3 years. That doesn't mean we've been standing still. So the structure has evolved with people doing different, same role but slightly differently. So that we've been harmonising our services as much as possible behind the scenes. So supervisors have started taking responsibility for other areas where they used to maybe be based only in Kettering and Corby. They've taken more of an interest in Wellingborough and taken more responsibility for Wellingborough. So we've got a number of interim arrangements in place to start working as one unitary authority, as you would expect a waste team to work, rather than working within the individual silos. So we have broken down an awful lot of the silos already. What we now need to do is implement the new structure, and obviously pay and grading has been going on, so now that that's completed, that really helps that process as well. So as the Assistant Director, I've launched the consultation with the management team within Waste a few weeks ago, so we're currently in that consultation period. So that's phase 1 of the restructure. When that phase is finished, and it depends a bit how the consultation period develops, and what falls out after that as to how long it will take. But we're talking, a couple of months probably. I would hope, and then we'll know where we are in terms of the management structure, and then we can move on to the phase 2, which will look at all the teams beneath that and how we want to arrange the teams beneath that, so that we're working as one unitary authority, with responsibility for collection and disposal, rather than obviously previously when we had 4 districts and boroughs all working in different ways and the county council. So we've done a lot of work, but there's still more work to do just to formalise that structure. But we're in a good place, and it is exciting to be getting on with that project as well. In terms of the food waste, yeah, we do use different vehicles at the moment. So just for those who don't follow the waste industry quite as much as Charlotte and I do, there's a number of different ways you can collect food waste. 3 predominant ones, I suppose, or two predominant ones, really. No, that's 3. So you can have an individual vehicle, a smaller, a little baby dust cart, for want of a better term, and it comes around and collects the food waste, and it only collects food waste, and it goes on its way. Benefit of that is that it can nip around quite quickly. It only stops at the properties that have actually put food waste out at the time, and it can actually, it's a really efficient little vehicle, to be honest. Then they've also, and I've run a service in the past where food waste was introduced about 10 years ago, where we had, at the back, you had the bin lifts as normal, but you had 70% of it was a recycling or a general waste stream, depending on what week it was. And then the other 30%, so there was an aluminium or steel sheet down the middle, 30% of it was food waste. That was sort of one approach that one of the manufacturers had taken, and we ran that for many years. But at the end of the life of those vehicles, we weren't going to run that way anymore for a number of operational reasons. One is vehicles tend to be slightly larger to make space for all that. The other is you get into technical situations where your recycling, particularly if you don't have much glass in it, is actually quite light. Your food waste is very dense. Your food waste sops around and moves. Your recycling doesn't. So when you start going around the corner and you've got the right-hand side with food waste slopping around with a lot of density, it starts to affect how the vehicle behaves. So that wasn't the way forward. The third option, and I haven't seen one of these for a long time, is to have a vehicle where at the back you put the recycling of the general waste in, and then just behind the cab in front of that is another pod, a separate pod, where you side load the food waste into a separate container. Those have gone out of fashion as well. So essentially the market over the last 10 years or so, where food waste has become quite common, and a lot of local authorities have tried a number of different vehicles, and it seems to have settled for lots of various different reasons on an individual smaller food waste vehicle. So that's the direction that we're going in. And also, as Jonathan says, a lot of our larger fleet is already tied up anyway for several years. So that's not necessarily an option to remove those and replace them with these joint ones that I was talking about. I just want to come back to trade waste as well. We already have a really successful commercial waste service. I wouldn't want anybody to think that we haven't been one operating that or pushing that. We generate over £1 million of income a year on trade waste. So we have a big order book, and we're continually pushing harder to get more and more customers because we run an excellent service. So we're very keen to continue commercialising that service as much as we possibly can. I think garden waste stickers, they will come. We realise there has been a delay for some people waiting for garden waste stickers. First message is, if you've renewed and paid but waiting for your sticker, put your bin out and we will collect it. The other message is the stickers are coming. We expect them to start landing next week and the week after. So we will have an awful lot of stickers landing with residents in the next couple of weeks. So that will improve things, because I know that there have been concerns from some who are waiting for stickers. Do you want to handle any of the others? We've talked quite a bit about education already, but the litter bins was one that came up.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So, and on the education, I was talking to Brownies just last week, so it does still happen, still available for those evening visits if anyone's really, really interested. So the litter bins in the high street, high streets across the mall is one of my own. It's become a bit of a personal thing. And yeah, we'd like to do a lot more, but one of the things we are looking to do, and we're starting to be quite successful, is we're looking to augment that with the community payback teams. So one of the jobs for them very shortly is we've done a survey of all the bins, is to go through, funny enough, and remove all the stickers, repaint, refurbish where we can, and then we'll replace the other ones. So that, again, that's an early win for us. We should start to see that fairly soon. And so then again, that will then address the sort of the broken and the burnt out ones as well. So we'll sort of go through the whole patch. But we do have a network of over 3,000 litter bins to maintain. So it's quite a big undertaking. But as I said, so we are on it. But again, bit of a plug for the community payback team. We are using them to quite good effect. We're probably sending them out to 2 or 3 things a week. So again, please keep filtering those things through to us, because that's a really good source of labour. And the Probation Service and the Ministry of Justice are very pleased to see us using that labour. So again, they can be used for all those things that we might have said before. Oh, don't know, is it, who? They are absolutely the kind of things that we can look at. So please come talk to me if you've got areas that you want us to look at. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkes, for you.
Thank you, Chair. Frighteningly, I find myself agreeing with Councillor Pengelly. In fairness, I think it's because I'm distracted by Councillor Fedorovic's idea that we're going to have a farm with 1 billion cockroaches running around somewhere in Northants drinking our bin juice. But Councillor Pengelly, and it's been said by others, it's hard to think that there won't be economies of scale. It's hard to see what the business case would be to have a divided service across Northants Council, where some of it's outsourced and some of it is bought in-house. I have no preference either way. I mean, I guess what the council want to do is just ensure that we get great value for money, that the service that we're offering to the residents is as good as it can be, and that we're exceeding our own recycling targets. So how we do that, I'm sure a business case will come to a future scrutiny, so that we can have a look at that. As far as the recommendations go, coming back to the recommendations, there are 2 of them. Recognising the progress against the 3-year plan one. It's a great report. It's great to see that we're on track, exceeding really, but they're on track with what we want. The key decision for the executive about East Northants and what do we do with that contract when it expires at 2025, I think. That's really, I find that really difficult for us to answer because, going back to what I just said, the exec at some stage are going to present to scrutiny an idea that either it is all bought in-house, it's partially bought in-house, or it's all outsourced. So when it comes to extending the East Northants contract, we would not, I would imagine, want to extend that contract, the outsourced contract, for any longer or indeed any shorter than is necessary for it to fall in line with an exec decision on what we're going to do. We don't want the exec to say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to bring it all in-house, and we say, well, what a shame, we've just signed a 7-year extension with East Northants, and it messes everything up. But conversely, we don't want it the other way. So from a recommendation point of view, from guidance to the exec, it is that that contract is extended no more and no less than is required to bring it in line with the decision that presumably exec are going to bring to us. So.
I think there are basically, recommendation 1's fine, but there are basically 3 options: bring it all in-house, promptly, take it all out, or extend for a period of time with SC in order for the rest of the ducks to fall in place and the rest of the things. And I think there is some merit in recommending to exec that for instance, a 2-year extension is the way to go, so that all the other bits and pieces like the restructure and the sorting out the depots can be done in, without trying to rush it as we did with the North contract. Has any other? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of other quick final points, things I'd found at the bottom of my document I'd missed. We mentioned also that lots of energy is being used by the sorting sites, and I just wondered if there would be any scope to encourage our waste facilities to be more powered by renewables. If we're already doing that, that would be great. But I didn't know also how many are already powered by renewables, part or wholly. I presume probably not wholly because it's an incredible amount of energy. I mean, in terms of circular economy wasn't really mentioned. I appreciate this is a very short report, but I do know that that's a real big priority for the household waste recycling centres, and it would be really good to see. I know just that is already being looked at in terms of those sites being able to be used more for like the reuse and recycling side of things, because we used to be able to purchase a lot from there and do a lot of that kind of repair and reuse at those sites, and I think more of that would be really, really good and tie in with that broader circular economy scope. Public recycling bins has already been mentioned, but I did want to mention as well that a lot of town and parish councils are already having this conversation. Kettering Town Council, for instance, we are already looking to potentially fund that. So it's something worthwhile just noting that even just reaching out to them if that is something that you're looking at, or it might be that it could be more of a collaborative project on a local level that you could do your pilot with a town or parish council that wants to look at that. And I noted also about the fact that we're leasing our electric refuse vehicle, which is obviously the first step in understanding if it works for us, and sort of testing the water, as it were. It would be really good to know. Obviously, we can purchase them, and that I know the cost of that is quite high. I've seen them, but it would be useful to know if that's in the pipeline at all to purchase them. Thanks.
I'll try, conscious of time, so I'll try and be as quick as I can. Yes, in terms of the vehicles, we've looked at, certainly with the food waste ones, we've started to look at purchase price for electric versus diesel. So again, we can expand possibly at a later date at some of those differentials in terms of that. Energy being used at sorting sites. Again, one of the benefits of doing the contracts first was we've already baselined all of the carbon outputs from all of those, and we've put into the contract requirements of these contracts that those people must look to improve the carbon on their own sites in conjunction with contracts. So we've used that commissioning power to leverage our supply chain to start thinking about that as well. And that is something that we will continue to do as we move on. And as we get more confident with the carbon journey, then we can be better at then getting our supply chain on that. One of our sites is already using green energy. So we are in the very, very baby steps, but we are at least up and running and starting to move forward on that. Hopefully that answers all your questions. Thank you.
Chair, very quickly, if you don't mind, to answer the circular economy question. You're quite right, circular economy is really, really important and an area that we will increasingly look at. We already do activity around it. With the re-procurement of the HWRCs, there is quite rightly, there's a requirement in procurement law around obtaining social value alongside operational and financial value. And within that, I'm expecting the bids, when they come back, to talk about how they can contribute towards social value, and I suspect they'll be talking about reuse, given the nature of those operations. So I look forward to seeing how the market will respond to that challenge that we set them.
Okay, so our recommendation A is fine. So B, do we agree that a short extension is the? I mean, Councillor Wilkes has proposed that as well. And a short proposal, extension for FCC is the way forward at this point. In order, go on.
Yeah, I support that, but there is that ride that they turn on and say, which happened in the past with other contracts. If you don't give us 7 years, then we're going to walk. And if they do that, then we have to take it back.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I mean, Mr. Kane said at the beginning that he hadn't spoken to, or they hadn't got the opinion of FCC, but I would. Okay. So
Could we just make sure that the cost and carbon are part of that report as well? I'm
sure the specifications will be.
Thank you.
I don't know, when you extend a contract, I don't know how much change you can make to it, but I suppose if both parties agree. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And we're now on to our third item, asset rationalisation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just loading up the technology.
I was hoping that the chairman of the panel was going to be here, but she's got another engagement tonight, so she can't be with us. Yeah.
Chair, just mindful of time, and we've got a short presentation to go through that hopefully you've all had a chance to look through. Are you content if I just pull out some of the key points from it and perhaps go down to the end in terms of the recommendation, if that's okay? Perfect, thank you. So, feedback from the Asset Rationalisation and Use Scrutiny panel. So just by way of background, the panel was established in 2022. Just looking behind me to check it is there. Yes, excellent. In 2022, to look at a number of asset-themed matters that the panel was instructed to go away and consider. And it was made up of 6 members, as you can see on the screen. that panel, that group, determined at the first meeting that it would focus on NNC's office estate in terms of considering the approach to rationalisation and consolidation and what that might look like in terms of the various factors that would be considered. The panel also undertook a review or input to various policies that have all come through in terms of looking at the drafts for those, input into those, and those policies have all been through executive and approved. So it's been a real positive panel through which we've been able to sense check proposed policies and also importantly weave in that ward member feedback into decision making around assets, which has been really, really positive as a group. So in terms of the focus of this presentation, we were going to look at the approach that the panel has taken to the consolidation of our office estate. And I will keep flicking through the slides, but I'm happy to go back and look at any of the detail in terms of any questions you've got. So in terms of our office estate, the following buildings were the ones that we deemed in scope, and some of those you'll be familiar with, others less so. But that's partly because some of those buildings are legacy arrangements where office-based staff have been based in buildings that haven't necessarily always been considered to be an office, such as Westcliff Day Centre, as you'll see, stands out as an obvious one that you wouldn't have thought would be an office. So the 12 buildings there have been the ones that have been in scope of this review, which you can all see from the pictures in terms of the mixture of different buildings that have formed this review in terms of age, condition, and all those sorts of things. And what we've looked to do is focus on that consolidation. So obviously we've inherited this estate from the previous councils. We've worked with it in terms of how it's worked over the last few years. And what we're doing with this proposal is looking at that consolidation. So looking to reduce down the estate for various different reasons as articulated in the presentation. But it's obviously also worth just bearing in mind that asset management is an ongoing process. So there's always a future that we're working towards in terms of what the estate needs of the council will be, particularly as it develops as an organisation. So I will skip over the detail in terms of the analysis, in so much to say that obviously the panel looked at a range of different data, ranging from the energy performance certificates, maintenance issues surrounding some of our estate, budget data as we had it, what sort of potential opportunities might be available as alternative uses to some of our buildings, but also looking at the constraints such as existing leases, particularly where we've got partners present, like the police, Citizens Advice Bureau and others, where we've got them present in our buildings. They also looked at restrictive covenants, so some of our buildings do have covenants that limit alternative uses. But the key bit that the panel were able to bring to it was that social and heritage value, particularly when looking at the benefit that those buildings have locally. So in terms of what the end proposal, in terms of what the panel reached, was to retain the following offices, as you can see on screen, which does reduce the number down quite significantly from that original 12. What I would say is, obviously, with the Wellingborough one, is quite want to be clear that it's not about that we won't have a presence in Wellingborough anymore. It's about that we want to have a different presence. So key part of that is obviously having a customer service location, but also having a location for locality teams that need to be based there. What this proposal isn't saying that we won't have anything in Wellingborough, it's just purely saying it will be slightly different, and what that different is the next step in terms of considering that and looking at those different options, of which there are a number locally that could, really perhaps even give a better service than what has already been delivered. In terms of the sites to be reviewed, they're listed on the slide now. I think the key message with this is that because they're being reviewed doesn't mean they'll instantly be sold. There is a process that we go through our asset disposal policy, which looks at a range of different factors in terms of different uses, whether that is another service use, a community use, or an opportunity to use the buildings with our partners, or indeed a commercial letting to try and bring some money into the council. So there's lots of different considerations that go through the asset before a decision is made that it will be surplus and sold. So in terms of the next steps, obviously there is a programme around consolidation of the estate, and that will work its course over 2024. Part of that includes staff consultations and various comms messages that went out to staff and union colleagues today, as well as looking to invest in the building. So we have an identified capital budget that we'd be looking to invest and improve the retained estate. I've covered the next bullet point around the asset management review groups. That's a group we have through the disposal policy that collates those considerations and through which we would obtain ward member feedback in terms of the potential properties that we'd be looking to do something differently with. So that's the proposal in terms of that came from the work with the panel. What we're also seeking feedback on is the next steps in terms of what the committee would like to see the panel look at next. We've put a couple of suggestions there in terms of the minimum energy efficiency standards regulations, which is quite a hot topic in the property world in terms of the impact that will have on the estate and changes to the estate as those regulations would become tighter. And then the other proposals around the commercial estate. We have a significant commercial estate, and again, it's something that we could look at with the scrutiny committee in terms of providing reassurance around how that's being managed and future development or changes to the commercial estate. So happy to take any questions on the report, Chair, and go over any of the detail in the presentation.
Thank you for that. I was able to go on a couple of the visits, and it was quite stark, the underutilisation of the offices at Bowling Green Road. It was only 20 or 30 computers in there and one person. It was quite revealing. But my questions will relate, unsurprisingly, to Wellingborough. And obviously, Swanspool House is a difficult conundrum because it's not really fit for anything in terms of offices or commercial use. It was a house, and it still looks like that. And obviously, the rear part, it was designed about 50 years ago for 15 years life, and it provides considerable. And it would be somebody's knocked obviously a great big hole in the back of it in order to access it. So it would be a very expensive option, and I really struggle to think what use. But I think it has to be community use because of the way it was given to the town, and there would be considerable concern if there wasn't some community use found. But in terms of a presence, I think this should be some consideration of Croyland Hall and Croyland Abbey, which are town centre buildings. They're listed, so they'd be difficult to exit from. But they have in the past been used. The planning department used to sit in Croyland Abbey. The museum was in Croyland Hall, so those buildings are old, but are not particularly modern business friendly. But they for a presence for the public to go in and meet people, I think they would be quite usable. That's my bits. So Councillor Pengelly, your hand I saw first.
Yeah, in relation to Wellingborough, I think it's really important that we do have some sort of civic presence because it's important for the economic regeneration of the town as well, because it's shown that where you have good council offices, people come in, the footfall and they use the shops and restaurants and everything else. So, and I know what you said, you're going to look at that going forward. I'm sure with the Wellingborough councillors, you'll work on that and you'll get something you're happy with. In relation to, and I'd just like to say that this is a brilliant report and it's been worked on really, really hard by officers and the panel as well, so I'd like to welcome that. A couple of issues with the report, and one of them is Grosvenor House, which is probably unsurprising. Somebody said eyesore. I was at a residence meeting before I left here tonight, and there's about 25 people there. One person said it was an eyesore, everybody said it was an iconic, beautiful building of that time where we should keep it and do nothing with it. I know you're not saying knock it down, but I think it's important we keep that building one way or another. And I don't know if it was you, Jonathan, or your predecessor at Corby Borough Council, when we looked at that building in the past, and what we got told at that time was we get substantial income on rent from the shops underneath it. And I don't know if that's the same, but you've got McDonald's, you've got the restaurant. I know the restaurant's closed at the moment. You've got the chemist, you've got other shops around there as well. And we got told that the argument was to keep it because of the substantial income we got from that. We're also, as a council, there's 4 projects that we're looking at for the town's board. Project 1 is now complete, and it was the new sixth form college. Project 2 is a £1.5 million project to create a hub on the first and second floor of that building. So, and there's already a substantial amount of money been spent on that. So what we're saying that's going to end now? Is that going to stop? Are we going to put that in abeyance while we look at the future of that building? And so I'd like to understand what you're looking at, because are we going to look at probably using a private company or somebody else to be renting them offices out? I remember when that office block was used for the council, for the council chamber, which was the old nightclub on the first floor. We had the chief executive suite on the 5th floor, I think it was. So it is a building that can be used. It needs money spent on it, and I think with the selling of the West Glebe site and other sites, we could use that money to do some of the other offices up. In relation to them sites that you're selling off, I would hope that what we would do is consider them to be used for council housing. CNS House could be converted into flats for council properties, which are much needed. West Glebe, I know that people are saying there could be a cracking town council office, but it could also be an extension to that to that housing estate that's been put down there, and we could make a lot of money on that. And let's make it council properties down there as well. We need council properties, and we should use the land that we own to benefit people that we represent. So thank you for that. But well done on the report. I welcome it. And it's something that we said when the council came forward. We had to consolidate some of the buildings we've got. We're going to do another report on other buildings as well. So welcome what's come forward.
Before you answer that, I vote I saw, but I wondered, when I looked at it, I wondered if it is, Councillor Pengelly mentioned housing, I wondered if it is convertible to flats, that particular building. But so perhaps answer 2 at once there.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, it's certainly iconic. It splits opinion. I suppose the eyesore element is more the telecoms bit at the top in terms of that aspect. It does indeed bring rental income in from both the telecoms and the retail units before, but at the bottom of the building. We also do still lease out parts of the building inside to small businesses in terms of small office space, of which there is a demand. It's not the biggest income earner, but there is certainly a small demand for that sort of type of space. In terms of the town fund project, not at all. And it's referred to on slide 12 is that community letting as part of the multi-use building is still very much on the cards in terms of that project, and it's still happening. The bit around the exiting the building more relates to whether we're having staff there necessarily or not. But in terms of having things like the CCTV control centre there and things like that, we are limited where we can move staff to, so we are kind of constrained to having that. The feedback from the panel was more around if the Townsend project didn't progress, then we should take a step back and look at what is the best thing for the building in terms of do we retain it, invest in it, or do we look at something else? And that was the key bit, and it was kind of dependent on what happens with that Towns Fund project, and it kind of hinges upon that in terms of Grosvenor House. In terms of question around council housing, so that is the process we'll go through is through the Asset Management Review Group. So we have representatives from the different services there, including housing, but we would it sounds a bit like an auction, but almost we bring the properties to them so that they can look at, we bring the data, information so that they can look at it and say, right, will this work as a council house development? Will it work for a special educational needs development for the education team? Will it work for the Children's Trust in terms of some sort of children's home or otherwise that they can use to help with their services? So the key bit is that everyone or every service gets an opportunity to consider that before the property is sold. So the last thing we want to do is be selling assets that we could be using ourselves to a much better cause.
Councillor Angelo was next.
Yeah, thank you. Not surprisingly, the 2 items that I'm particularly interested in are the Wellingborough ones. I think it's been on the cards for a little while, probably even when it was a borough, that the Tithe Barn office block would be up for redevelopment. I think it's been underused for a long time. If that was turned into flats, for example, which is something that people have said to me, as adjacent to that is an old NFU office block that's been very successfully turned into accommodation, yeah? Would that then automatically go to Greatwell Homes, or would it be something that Northants would take on? That's, yeah, would we, because it would have, if we kept it ourselves, it would be the only council housing in Wellingborough, because the rest is Greatwell Homes, isn't it? So that's just one question. The other point is about Swanspool House itself. You know, it was given to the town, okay? Just need to know, you need to know that. So the town and the gardens and the pavilion were given to the town of Wellingborough, but it has now been passed over, obviously. Some of the registrar office that used to be in Swanspool House is now in the library, in a very small little office, I must admit. Is there any possibility of using the library as a part of the hub for NNC? That's just an idea. You know, it's a large building. It's well used. There's a ground floor that's not used at all, but the first floor is well used. Has that been considered?
Starting with Tithe Barn, so ultimately it would be down to my housing colleagues to determine how that would work in terms of how the housing revenue account is set up, because they're typically set up on a geography and quite what would happen, and also if it was a council housing redevelopment rather than a private housing development and things like that. So there'd be considerations we'd have to make, and ultimately it would come down to their decision in terms of how they could make those finances work and also provide the support for the residents locally as well, in terms of having the appropriate team nearby and all those sorts of things to consider. In terms of Swanspool House, obviously I'm aware of the background to the building, and we have tried to be sympathetic and take that on board as part of the consideration. Certainly the panel were very keen to take that on board in terms of thinking about what sort of uses might be appropriate in terms of as a community use, which does reflect how the council came into ownership of the building. In terms of the registrar function in the library, so there's a couple of different options we're looking at for Wellingborough. Clearly the library is an obvious one in terms of the opportunity that presents in terms of starting to bring services together, but there's a degree of consideration around that, what would need to happen, but also linking in with Kerry and Jane's teams in terms of how that would impact the library service, because obviously what we wouldn't want to do is be at detriment to that. So there's lots of different considerations, there's lots of different options that might work. It'd be great to have something in the town centre that is local and sort of fits that bill in terms of the different needs we've got for Wellingborough locally. So yeah, no, thank you, but happy to take any suggestions as well outside of the meeting.
There's always Barclays Bank as well, because we own the freehold. We own the freehold of Barclays Bank, and of course that's empty, but not the lease. Any other comments on the Councillor Wilkes and then Councillor Owen?
Thank you, Chair. Mine's really quite quick. Two questions, but I wasn't aware of the restrictions on Swanspool House, as in that it was gifted. I suppose it does change things. I'm glad that we're going through this process, because we all know it's not unusual to speak to a member of staff, an officer, who says, actually, I'm alone. I'm alone in a great big building here. So, and we do know they're underutilised. I asked this question without knowing the commercial estate in detail. There is a recommendation to retain and reuse William Knibb. I don't know where that is. But I wonder, why is that? Why is it preferable to retain that over Sheerness House? If we're saying that we're going to get rid of one and keep another because we need one, and I ask that because without knowing William Knibb office, it says it's a Victorian block, which in my mind says it's going to need a ton of money spending on it if we're going to bring it up to current standards. It may be that Sheerness House, it may be that Sheerness also needs money spending on it, or maybe it's more valuable for development. But what's the thinking behind keeping one and not the other?
Yeah, so with William Knibb, it's a bit of a mix. So there's a Victorian part to it, but then there's more of a modern extension. And the modern extension is the bit where mostly we've got staff based in terms of that. It fits in terms of that need. There's also an opportunity in discussions with the trust, Children's Trust, in terms of being able to have a more of a Northants base in that building. So that's something we're exploring with them. Is obviously is dependent on reaching an agreement around that. There's also leases in place for the building with other parties. So Sheerness House, if we were looking to reduce down our footprint in Kettering, Sheerness House was the obvious one in terms of being able to move forward with that and just trying to consolidate into less buildings.
Councillor Owen.
Thank you. Thank you for this report, and I won't disagree with any of the recommendations. I will just note that the municipal offices in Kettering, which are very lovely, it says retain as a source of civic pride, and there's a lot of civic pride around Swanspool House as well. I do think that has been acknowledged, I think, in this. It's very reassuring to know that the idea is that it will, NNC will honour the fact that it was given as a gift to the people of Wellingborough Town. And I have to say, with that very useful list of with all the photographs that you provided in the report, when you look at it, I think the most beautiful building there is Swanspool House. I agree, it doesn't look very much like a council office, and it's not very practical for that. It looks to me like something that maybe you could do something with young people in. I don't know what, something. Perhaps it could be talked about in terms of a wider regeneration of Wellingborough, which Wellingborough is really starting to show signs that it will need. So whether that could be incorporated, the future use of Swanspool House for the people of Wellingborough and the people of Northamptonshire. Thank you.
Yeah, funny enough, one of the conversations at the Wellingborough LAP was to find somewhere for the young people to have as a safe and secure base in the town, maybe. Because it's listed, there's no lift, so it's not suitable. A lot of the rooms are just not suitable for public use. And some awkward staircases and all sorts. Councillor Vajarvich.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I definitely agree about the places for young people, and I think, maybe the Town Council could, Wellingborough Town Council could consider that a little bit. So, I just wanted to go through a couple of the Kettering sites, as those are the ones that I have the knowledge of. And so, in terms of the ones that have come forward here, I think just overall, efficiency is always good. Yes, this report is really, really helpful. But my kind of just initial thought was, if we're coming out of, we will be trying to exit the buildings that are in the worst state. And my other part of my brain is also thinking, well, those buildings are still going to exist within our the area that we look after. What's the future for that? I mean, I think obviously we've got some ideas of who would go in there, and if some of these need demolishing. Some of them actually I don't know that much, like Haylock House I don't really know as much, but that's looking like we're going to retain that, so that's really good. Sheerness House, I've been there, and I do support exiting this one, especially because I've been in there. I also, the last time I was there, the entire top floor was just unused, so there is a lot of space there that's not used, so I think that's really, really good that that's going to be coming off there. And would potentially be very good for a residential or office space. For the municipal offices in Kettering, I did want to ask about this, because obviously there's been a few comments tonight about it being underused, and Kettering Town Council were encouraged to find another home, essentially. So I kind of wanted to query that, really, because if we're looking to encourage more people in there, I find that kind of surprising that that Kettering Town Council were essentially removed. With William Nib, fantastic building. I noted here as well about the roof condition problems, which you can actually see from Google Maps, which is quite actually a bit of an opportunity if we're going to look to keep that building, because a lot of those rooftops are south-facing. So if we're looking at sorting the roof out, looking at solar alongside that, I think is a really powerful opportunity. Saunders Close, I have not been there, but I have heard things about it, that it's not an amazing building to be in. I think that's possibly the one that I'm the most worried about, is in terms of, I suppose, it's about our power as a council, and who are we encouraging into there if that needs complete reworking. Is there any scope for us to support whoever's taking that on to revamp it or anything like that? I appreciate we're kind of trying to save money by leaving these problematic buildings, but they're still going to exist. And what I'm trying to avoid, or see if we can avoid, is how do we stop these becoming like an eyesore or a blight in the area. So yes, I think that's everything. I'll just try and find my...
Yes, yep. Councillor Pengelly, do you want? Yeah,
just one thing that I didn't include in it. I think it's really important we do consult with unions and staff that could be getting moved out of these, ensuring, and also user groups. And I remember Saunders Close, when I was on the buses many years ago, that was a place where adult social care was based, and there was a day centre. I don't know if that's still there, I don't know if that'd be lost, because that'd be if it is lost and it's still there, I don't know, because things change so quickly, that would be very good. So we have to just make sure that everybody gets bought into this, and also consulting with councillors as well, ensuring councillors, especially town councils, are also kept in touch with what's going on as well, and consulted on this.
I think one of the reasons for the delay in producing this was that unions and staff were being informed. Did you anything else you want to add?
I think most of the points have already been covered, but certainly unions will be part of the conversation, and I've briefed them and met with them, and they'll be part of the staff consultation as that progresses forward.
Okay. We're all done. So I think that brings us to the point of looking at the recommendations in 3.1. So I think everybody's fairly happy with the report and the conclusions that are in there. And obviously Mr. Waterworth made note of some of our comments. I think to me it's useful that the panel continues, especially looking at the commercial portfolio, which is quite considerable, and of course has come from 4 or 5 different predecessor authorities. So I think that's quite valuable. As to the makeup of it, I think none of the people who are actually on it are here, so I don't think it'd be fair to look at the makeup, but perhaps we could send something round to everybody, ask them who's interested in being on it, and if it continues. Is that? Yeah, sorry. Yes. 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 Well, technically, a working party doesn't have to have members of Scrutiny, have from people from other panels as well. Is there any? That's within our gift. We don't have to recommend that to exec. But I think what we're saying, we recommend the report to exec with the comments about the future of the various buildings we've made. Okay. Well done, everybody. Thank you very much. You got back 22 minutes of your life for the possible 3 hours. So thank you very much. Yes, there's no other item. There's no other item on the agenda.